Chapter 2167. On the ninth floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace, an old man sat in a gloomy cave with his presence concealed in a desolate mountain range that few people set foot in. It was obvious with a single glance that the old man was hiding from something. He was extremely cautious. Not only did he carefully conceal himself at all times, but he even covered the surroundings of the cave with various concealment formations of quite a high level. Even if an expert on the level of a divine king passed by the cave, they would not discover the secrets hidden here. Just who is this Ming Dong? He's actually killed 4 supreme divine kings in a row. Even Yun Xiaoyan of the Thousand Lotus Empire and Kang Mengfian of the Kang Meng clan have died. The old man frowned as he murmured to himself. The old man was the divine king below the divine king Tsang. Tsang had not emerged in the past few days. He had been hiding in the cave the entire time, doing his best to avoid clashing with Ming Dong. When he had made this decision, it was not because he feared Ming Dong. Instead, he did not want to become a burden to the young master of Mo Cheng. He had come to the Blue Poseidon Palace, this time under his master's orders to protect Mo Cheng. Although he had not emerged in the past few days, he was extremely well informed. He basically knew everything that had happened in the Blue Poseidon Palace. As a result, he obviously knew what Ming Dong had done. In the beginning, Tsang had been deeply shocked when Ming Dong had killed 2 divine kings in the battle on the Moon's View Peak. Afterwards, when several supreme god kings died to Ming Dong's hands one after another, Tsang truly began to take Ming Dong seriously. As a matter of fact, it had even reached the level of fear. Looks like the Blue Poseidon Palace is not a place to stay for long. For the young master's safety, I might as well take the young master out of the Blue Poseidon Palace ahead of time, Tsang thought. However, at this moment, Tsang's eyes suddenly narrowed. He suddenly raised his hand, and a piece of azure scale vaguely appeared on his palm. It flickered with light. A great sense of danger was clearly transmitted to Tsang's heart through the scale. Oh no! Tsang's face changed. Without any hesitation, he vanished from the gloomy cave with a slight sway of his body. When he reappeared, he was already outside the cave. He hurriedly sent a message to Mo Cheng, who was in seclusion in another cave. Afterwards, azure light flickered on his body as he shot off into the distance with unbelievable speed. At the same time, the silent space in the air above the mountain range suddenly twisted. Ming Dong silently appeared there with the 5 divine generals. I never thought that he would be able to sense our arrival, but since I found him, he can forget about escaping. Chase him! Ming Dong glared at Tsang's departing figure as he said emotionlessly. He immediately chased after him with the 5 divine generals. In terms of strength, Tsang might only be at the bottom of the divine king's list, but in terms of speed, he was definitely one of the best. Azure light flickered on Tsang. At that moment, he seemed to have become an azure pung. He shot through the 9th floor at an extremely terrifying speed, crossing 100,000 kilometers in a single instance. He moved even faster than a meteor. It was truly terrifying. When he flew over a few divine kings, some of them did not even sense him at all. They did not discover his existence. Ming Dong pursued Tsang closely with the 5 divine generals. They all used secret techniques and pushed their speed to the limit. In particular, the laws of wind revolved around Ming Dong. He turned into a gentle gust of wind as he rapidly advanced. However, they were still far behind Tsang. It was difficult for them to catch up. That's the Azure Peng's movement technique. 9th Majesty, the Azure Peng is a rather renowned peak expert in the Saint's world. He's renowned for his speed. Since this person possesses the Azure Peng's movement technique, it'll be very difficult for us to catch up to him, said a divine general behind Ming Dong. Really? Then let's see how long he can maintain the speed for, sneered Ming Dong. He used a secret technique. As he formed seals with his hands, a dazzling ball of golden light suddenly appeared, condensing into the shape of a tower. As soon as the pagoda was formed, a vast and majestic aura spread out. There seemed to be a supreme Taoist rhyme circulating on the pagoda. Although it was hazy and blurry, it gave people the illusion that it could suppress the great way of heaven and earth. If Jianchen were present, he would definitely be able to tell with a single glance that the tower Mingdong had condensed was 70% similar to the Anatat Tower. The difference was because the Anatat Tower was just too damaged, making it difficult for him to take a closer look. Moreover, the presences of the two towers were completely different as well. The Anatat Tower in Jianchen's hand seemed extremely ordinary. Aside from being covered in sword slashes, there was nothing particularly special about it. However, the tower Mingdong had condensed through a secret technique gave off a presence that could make the world pale. It was extremely dazzling and sharp, such that no one could ignore its existence. According to my 8th senior sister, this technique was created by my 1st senior sister, based on Master's famed treasure in the past. Even though I can't even unleash a 10,000th of the technique's power with my current cultivation, it's nowhere near as powerful as the other battle skills I know in an open battle. However, this technique can pierce through space and ignore the distance of space. It's perfect for a situation like this, Mingdong growled before extending a finger towards Song-Ying from afar. With that, the figure of the Anatat Tower condensed before him immediately vanished. It pierced through space and passed through the restraints of space and time, appearing behind Song-Ying in a single instance. Song-Ying naturally sensed the danger behind him, which made his face change drastically. However, Mingdong's secret technique had been created based on the Anatat Tower. Even though the power it could unleash was extremely limited in Mingdong's hands, it still possessed some of the Anatat Tower's charm, so Song-Ying was unable to dodge it at all. Bang! With a heavy sound, the figure of the Anatat Tower struck Song-Ying's back, causing him to vomit blood. He was heavily injured and slowed down as well. Song-Ying's heart sank. He knew that it was difficult for him to maintain his advantage against the pursuit of the people behind him in his current state. Determination immediately filled his face as he rapidly advanced towards the 8th floor. Many divine kings had already gathered on the 8th floor of the Anatat Tower in the world of volcanoes. There were so many of them that there were over 10,000 of them. Even the supreme divine king below, the divine king, had quite a few of them. Moreover, the number was constantly increasing because divine kings would be descending from the 9th floor or climbing up from the 7th at basically every single moment. As a result, basically over 80% of the cultivators on the Poseidon Palace had gathered on the 8th floor of the Poseidon Palace. All of them gathered around the spot where Jianchen had fallen into the lava. Sometimes their eyes would shine brightly as they stared at the churning lava below. Other times, they would close their eyes and sense carefully as if they were searching for something. Since that girl is protected by the power of the Poseidon Palace, she definitely won't die. Everyone, let's think of a way and see if we can enter the lava to search. That's right. That girl must be trapped in the lava. With her mere strength at the mortal realm, she can't come up at all. We need to save her. The lava is terrifying, but we have defensive god artifacts. If we work together and push the god artifacts to their limits, I believe we can last a while in the lava. That girl is extremely important. We have to find her no matter what. We can't afford to fail. Chapter 2168. Among the large and small groups of Divine King, there were a dozen or so groups that were the most powerful. Many great experts who had reached the late Divine King realm were rejected when they tried to join these groups, as they were not qualified. The group led by Jia Na was one of the dozen or so most powerful groups. Not only did they gather many supreme god kings from the god king's throne, but they even had a few god artifacts as well. At this moment, 2 people were seated in the air in the group, led by Jia Na. They were resting with their eyes closed, as if they did not care about the conflict in the outside world. The 2 of them were Gong Zheng and Bai Yi, who had attacked Jianchen together with a few others. Now, Gong Zheng and Bai Yi had revealed their original appearances and were openly exposed to the crowd. They did not care if someone recognized them and went to Mingdong to claim the high reward. Gongzheng, Bai Yi, how are your injuries? A burly middle-aged man walked over. He glanced at Gongzheng and Bai Yi. The middle-aged man was Jia Na. Perhaps many of the divine king in the Poseidon Palace did not recognize Jia Na, but over 90% of the cultivators were familiar with his name. This was because Jia Na was an extremely powerful supreme divine king below the divine king. He was already ranked in the top 100 at 99th place. This was a very high ranking. Gongzheng and Bai Yi opened their eyes. Their gazes gathered on Jia Na as they became solemn. With Brother Jia Na's divine nullification pill, most of the injuries to our souls have recovered. Although it will still take a very long time to fully recover, it won't affect our strength much anymore. Gongzheng will remember Brother Jia Na's assistance today. If there is an opportunity in the future, I will definitely repay you. Gongzheng stood up and clasped his hands at Jia Na. Bai Yi stood up as well and clasped his hands at Jia Na as well, exchanging some pleasantries. If Jia Na hadn't given him a divine grade pill, the divine nullification pill, which was specially used to heal injuries to the primordial spirit, his primordial spirit definitely wouldn't have been able to recover to this extent. Jia Na laughed and said, "Our sect has a close relationship with your absolute sword sect. It's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. The two of you make your preparations. We're about to move out. I hope that with our combined strength, we'll be able to fully utilize the defensive power of the Rising Sun Sacred Light Pearl. That way, we'll be able to last a little longer in the lava, and our chances of finding that little girl will greatly increase." Soon, Jia Na gathered everyone and took out the Sunrise Holy Light Pearl. He was prepared to work with everyone to activate the Sunrise Holy Light Pearl and dive into the lava. At the same time, many people from the other groups had already begun to move. Every group had at least one defensive artifact. Then they used various methods and combined the power of many people to push the artifact to the limit. They used the protection of the artifact to enter the depths of the lava. However, at this moment, a powerful pulse of energy appeared in the distance. An azure figure appeared in the distance, turning into an illusionary azure pung. He used his speed to flee in an extremely horrible manner. Behind him, 6 figures radiated the light of laws as they pursued him relentlessly, unleashing powerful attacks that mercilessly bombarded the fleeing people in front of them. That person is Mingdong. The person being hunted down by Mingdong is a supreme divine king. I seem to remember that the person who fled seemed to be one of the people who attacked Genshin. I never thought that he would be hunted down so miserably by Mingdong. That's the Azure Peng's movement technique. Anyone who can use it must be under the Azure Peng King. I wonder what Mingdong's background is. He doesn't even fear the Azure Peng King. The Azure Peng King is known for being protective. A few divine kings saw this from afar, and their eyes all narrowed as they sighed in amazement. Boom! At this moment, a muffled boom suddenly rang out. The dozen or so volcanoes in the surroundings erupted at the same time. Terrifying lava formed a dozen or so huge pillars of fire that soared into the sky. Then they scattered in all directions in the sky, enveloping the entire area and causing a rain of lava to fall. The space on the 8th floor had always been very unstable. Battles between regular divine kings could lead to erupting volcanoes, so the divine kings gathered here needed to conceal their presences carefully. However, Mingdong chased after Tsang-ing aggressively with the 5 divine generals. He struck out fearlessly, erupting with the might of a supreme divine king. The powerful ripples of energy from his destructive power immediately broke the peace there and caused the volcanoes nearby to erupt. Oh no, Dodge! The expressions of all the divine kings gathered here changed when they saw the dense rain of lava in the sky. They fled in all directions as quickly as they could. Even the supreme divine king on the divine king was forced to dodge. He did not dare to come in contact with the lava. Even though the lava was only the size of raindrops, It was not something that a divine king could endure. This was because the temperature was over 10,000 times hotter than the core of a sun. At this moment, Mingdong had already caught up to Tsanging. His eyes were cold as killing intent surged. He gathered the power of destruction in his sword and directly swung it at Tsanging, causing Tsanging to constantly vomit blood. The azure pung scales that protected him dimmed as well. Mingdong's attack was nothing to be underestimated. Terrifying ripples of energy swept through the surroundings as a terrifying storm, causing even more volcanoes to erupt. Boom! 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 Immediately, heavy booms rang out incessantly. With Mingdong as the center, all the volcanoes within several 100,000 kilometers roused from their slumber. They erupted one after another, and pillars of lava seemed to transform into furious, roaring dragons as they rushed into the sky. They formed a rain of lava with terrifying heat as they rained down with many divine fire crystals. The entire 8th floor trembled violently. The fire elemental power in the surroundings became abnormally violent. Even the sea of lava beneath everyone's feet surged with great waves. Arg! In a single moment, screams rang out everywhere. Many god kings were unable to dodge in time under such a dense rain of lava. They were all injured by the rain of lava. Either their entire bodies were set ablaze, or holes were melted into their bodies. Oh no, there are too many people gathered here. Even though they've concealed their presences, there's still an invisible presence interfering with this place. It's silently destroying the stability of these volcanoes, causing them to erupt with unprecedented intensity. Chapter 2169. For a moment, shouts rang out everywhere. The many divine kings gathered in the world of volcanoes dodged the rain of fire with ugly expressions as they called out to Mingdong. Some of the more powerful divine kings either wore supreme quality saint artifacts or directly used god artifacts to protect themselves as they charged towards Mingdong with lightning speed. They wanted to stop Mingdong from fighting on this floor. All fighting is forbidden on the 8th floor. Stop immediately, or you'll be treating all of us as your enemies. Sir, there are far too many divine kings gathered on this floor. They've already destroyed the stability of the volcanoes. Even the slightest ripple of energy will cause the volcanoes to erupt. I don't care what grievances you have between the two of you. Stop fighting on this floor and conceal your presences obediently. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. Furious shouts rang out. Over 20 divine kings stood before Mingdong. Every single one of them was extremely powerful, and over half of them even possessed god artifacts. Even more people fended off the rain of lava as they watched on from afar. It's actually Mingdong, the person protected by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. A few divine kings in the crowd knew Mingdong's identity, and their faces changed slightly. They originally wanted to stop Mingdong, but they came to a halt. Although they did not know what kind of relationship Mingdong had with the heavenly palace of Bishing, or whether he was really the disciple of one of the majesties, they dared not offend him as long as he had even the slightest connection to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Bai Yi and Gong Zheng discovered Mingdong as well. They looked at each other and saw sternness in each other's eyes. In such a short amount of time, 4 of the 8 divine kings who had attacked Jianqin had died. The 5th, Tsanging, had fled in horrible shape. They were extremely fearful of such strength. So he's Mingdong. I've heard a lot about him in the past few days. Jia Na looked at Mingdong, who was stopped by over 20 divine kings from afar. He could not help but sneer. Afterwards, he arrived before Gongzheng and looked at Gongzheng's furrowed brows. He could not help but laugh aloud. Gongzheng, I know the two of you are Mingdong's targets as well, but you don't have to worry. Mingdong won't dare to touch you here. I wonder where this Mingdong came from. He really is a little too arrogant. A divine king in Gado's temporary group said coldly. Tsang Ying had already stopped running. He hovered in the air like a hawk and looked at Mingdong with lingering fear. He was also filled with lingering fear. Ming Dong was even more powerful than he had imagined. He had no doubt that if it were not for the warning from the Azure Pung scale and the Azure Pung movement, it would have been very difficult for him to escape from Ming Dong. Song Ying, why don't you join our group? If you have to, it'll be very difficult for you to protect yourself if you continue to be alone in your current state. Gong Zheng suddenly said to Song Ying, secretly inviting him to join. Song Ying's eyes immediately lit up when he saw that it was Gong Zheng. Afterwards, he discovered Bai Yi standing with Gong Zheng. So he did not hesitate at all and joined Gong Zheng's group without any hesitation. The three of them knew that Ming Dong had placed a bounty on them, so they must have been on Ming Dong's kill list long ago. With the strength that Ming Dong had displayed, fighting him alone was clearly an extremely unwise choice. Only by working together would they have the ability to fend him off. Ming Dong naturally discovered Bai Yi and Gong Zheng as well. Although this was the first time he had met the two of them, he had already gathered all the information he could find about the two of them during the past few days. Bai Yi, Gong Zheng, I never thought that the two of you would be here as well. The heavens really are on my side. Today, I'll kill all of you as well. I'll use the divine blood that flows in your bodies to pay tribute to my brother's soul in heaven. Ming Dong looked at the three of them from afar. His cold voice was filled with undisguised, killing intent. Afterwards, he looked at the 20 or so divine kings blocking his way. Not only did he not show any fear, but he instead became slightly crazed. He growled, "Anyone who gets in my way of revenge will become my greatest enemy. Do you really want to stop me?" As he spoke, a powerful presence began to gather from Ming Dong. It seemed like a storm was brewing. At that moment, Ming Dong was cold and domineering. He was unyielding. Anyone could tell that the two of them were already on the verge of clashing with weapons at the slightest disagreement. The 20 or so divine kings blocking Ming Dong all sneered when they heard Ming Dong's threat. Their faces were filled with disdain and mockery. Not only were the 20 or so people extremely powerful, but they were all supreme divine kings below the divine kings. Moreover, their backgrounds were extremely illustrious as well. Every single one of them had the backing of a peak clan or sect, so they did not take Ming Dong's threat seriously at all. In particular, there was a young man in red robes among the 20 or so divine kings. His name was Xianlong, and he was renowned for his fiery temper. He could not tolerate Ming Dong acting arrogantly in front of him at all. As a result, he immediately sneered when he heard Ming Dong's threat. His gaze became extremely hostile. He took a step forward coldly. However, just when Xianlong was about to say something, a voice suddenly rang out. "Xianlong, you can't provoke this Ming Dong, or it'll cause great trouble for your clan. Do you know who the 5 guards behind Ming Dong are? They're divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing." This sound came from Xianlong's mouth. Aside from Xianlong, no one else could hear it. However, when Xianlong heard that, his face immediately changed. He directly looked past Ming Dong and at the 5 guards. Disbelief filled his face. "Huang Baiyun, are you certain that the 5 of them are divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing?" Xianlong asked secretly as his face became uneasy. His fiery temper had been forcefully suppressed by the appearance of his identity as a divine general of the heavenly palace of Bixing. It's absolutely true. When the 5 of them entered the Azure Poseidon Palace, the armor they wore was the standard armor of the heavenly palace of Bixing. The person replied with absolute certainty. Having received confirmation, Xianlong's face immediately became stern. He deeply glanced at Ming Dong before clasping his hands at him. Without saying anything else, he turned around and left. He did not dare to stick his nose in other people's business. Although Xianlong had a fiery temper, he was no fool. He knew who he could ignore and who he could not provoke. Although he did not know Ming Dong's identity, he definitely could not provoke him since he had 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing behind him. Even though it was rumored in the saints' world that the Anita Grand Prime had died many years ago, the heavenly palace of Bishing would never fall as long as the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing remained. In particular, the first majesty was a terrifying figure who could strike fear into the hearts of many peak organizations across the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets. Chapter 2170. Xianlong's sudden change stunned all the people in the surroundings. Even the 20 or so divine kings who had come to stop Mingdong with Xianlong were clearly stunned. With Xianlong's previous attitude and expression, anyone could tell with a single glance that he was targeting Mingdong. Many people were already prepared to watch a good show. However, they never thought that the result would be so surprising. Xianlong actually turned around and left without saying anything. Wasn't his actions announcing to everyone that he wasn't going to stop Mingdong? And when he left, he even clasped his fist towards Mingdong in a friendly manner. Who was Xianlong? Not only was he a supreme God King on the God King's throne, but his background was rather great as well. In the eyes of many people, Xianlong was an unreachable existence that they could only look up to, yet now he had become frightened from Mingdong's threat. Everyone found this unbelievable. Xianlong's fear caused the expressions of the supreme God Kings who stopped Mingdong to change slightly. They all studied Mingdong as they became surprised and doubtful. Song Ying, Bai Yi, and Gongzheng, who had already gathered together, all had very ugly expressions. Xianlong had completely disregarded his dignity as a supreme divine king just because of Mingdong's threat. They could all tell just how terrifying Xianlong's fear of Mingdong was. Xianlong's ranking on the divine king's throne is quite high. He's extremely powerful, yet he doesn't dare to offend Mingdong. Just who is this Mingdong? Bai Yi growled. Song Ying and Gongzheng both shook their heads. Mingdong's name had always been unknown. It was only recently that it had gradually spread through the Tsang Poseidon Palace. They knew nothing about his identity and background. At this moment, a few more of the 20 or so supreme divine kings in Mingdong's way received a message. As a result, all of their faces changed without exception. A smear of shock appeared in their eyes. They were greatly surprised. They looked deeply at Mingdong and the 5 divine generals behind him before clasping their fists and leaving together. With that, only a dozen or so of the 20 or so divine kings in Mingdong's way remained. However, the dozen or so divine kings all looked at each other. Hesitation appeared on their faces, as if they were stuck in a dilemma. Clearly, they had also realized that Mingdong's identity was not to be underestimated. Otherwise, he would not have made so many supreme divine kings fear him. At the same time, another dozen or so divine kings arrived at the entrance to the 8th floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace from the 7th floor. A young man and a young woman walked at the very front of the group. The other divine kings followed behind them like guards. Junior Mu, you have to be careful on the 8th floor. Whether it's the volcanoes or the lava below, they're all extraordinary. They're extremely terrifying. Even the supreme divine kings of the divine kings need to be careful here. The handsome young man with extraordinary bearing at the very front looked at the veiled woman beside him gently. His voice was gentle and filled with undisguised admiration. The 2 of them were Jun Kong and Shangguan Mu who had hurried over from the Taoist sect of divine sound on the Skyfire Plain. The divine kings behind them were all disciples of the Taoist sect of divine sound. Shangguan Mu hovered in the air as she stared at the world of volcanoes with her enchanting eyes. Her face, hidden beneath the veil, actually showed some emotion at that moment. He's been here before, Shangguan Mu thought. As soon as she set foot on the 8th floor, she experienced a profound and wondrous feeling. She could sense that Jianqin had been here before, which caused ripples to appear in her cold, emotionless heart. She felt extremely excited. Jun Kong did not sense the subtle changes in Shangguan Mu. He said leisurely, the main reason why we've come to the Tsang Poseidon Palace this time is to go to the 12th floor and find a way to awaken the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry. As a result, we don't need to stop for too long along the way. Let's directly go to the 12th floor. Junior Moo. You don't have any objections, right? You go to the 12th floor first. I want to take a look around here, said Shangguan Moo. With that, she left by herself. She began to search for Jianqin with a throbbing heart. Junior Moo. Be careful. It's very dangerous here. Jun Kong immediately chased after her. Deep concern filled his face as he said gently, Since Junior Moo wants to take a look around here, I'll accompany you. Although this space is filled with danger, where the volcanoes can erupt at any time, you don't have to worry too much with me by your side. As they spoke, they had already arrived 10,000 kilometers away. However, at this moment, Jun Kong's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared ahead and immediately became stern. He said sternly, so many powerful presences. Strange. Why are there so many divine kings gathered up there? And there are quite a few divine kings as well. Jun Kong's expression changed a few times before he suddenly stopped Shangguan Moo. He said sternly, Junior Moo, stay here and don't move. I'll go take a look and see what's going on there for so many divine kings to gather together. Jun Kong got over a dozen divine kings from the Taoist sect of divine sound to protect Shangguan Moo, while he flew off by himself, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Very soon, Jun Kong arrived in the region where all the divine kings had gathered. As soon as he arrived, he just happened to see Ming Dong facing off against over a dozen divine kings, which made Jun Kong shiver inside. Many of the divine kings are stronger than me, but they clearly don't possess enough presence against the 6 of them. As a matter of fact, they don't give off any presence at all. Who are the 6 of them? They're actually able to make over a dozen divine kings fear them so much. Jun Kong was greatly shocked when he saw this. He was unable to remain calm. Afterwards, Jun Kong asked a few divine kings nearby about the reason why so many divine kings had gathered here. It said that they're all looking for a girl protected by the world, which is why they've all gathered here. It's rumored that whoever obtains the girl will gain control of the Poseidon Palace. In the end, the girl was taken away by a person called Jianqin. Afterwards, when Jianqin fled here with the girl, he was slain by a divine king. The girl seems to have fallen into the lava as well. The divine kings answered Jun Kong's questions in a simple manner. Even though they did not possess a lot of information, they were able to give a rough explanation. However, when Jun Kong heard the name Jianqin, his heart shuddered violently. He immediately asked, Is this person called Jianqin the young man who comprehended the laws of the sword and seemed to be in his 20s? It seems to be him. That's right. It's him. Although I've never seen Jianqin before, I've heard about him. The characteristics you mentioned completely match. Jun Kong became overjoyed when he received confirmation. He could not help but laugh aloud. Perhaps there would be many people with the same name in the Saints' world, but it would be impossible for them to come across people with the same name and characteristics. As a result, Jun Kong was basically certain that the Jianqin who had died here was the person his junior sister Moo had admired for a very long time. Ha ha ha! Jianqin, I never thought you'd actually die here. The heavens really are on my side. The heavens really are on my side. I was planning on finding people to kill you on the cloud plain after this trip to the Poseidon Palace. But I never thought you'd already die in the Poseidon Palace. It looks like the heavens are on my side. The heavens are helping me and junior sister Moo. Jun Kong was extremely overjoyed by Jianqin's death. He was so emotional that he lost himself and roared out as if he wanted to vent his emotions. Jun Kong's voice was not very loud, but the people gathered here were all powerful godhood experts. They could clearly hear any sound from 1,000 kilometers away, so Jun Kong's voice naturally rang out in everyone's ears. Originally, no one would treat this kind of emotional venting as a big deal, but Jun Kong just happened to mention the extremely sensitive name of Jianqin. Immediately, all the divine kings gathered in the surroundings looked at Jun Kong. All of their expressions were strange, and some of them even looked at him with schadenfreude. The divine kings who answered Jun Kong's question paled in fright. They cursed inside. Of all the people you could curse, you just had to curse Jianchen. Don't you know that as soon as Jianchen died, a vicious person called Mingdong appeared? He directly hunted down divine kings in the Poseidon Palace, directly leading to the deaths of 4 divine kings. If you want to die, don't drag us into it. Chapter 2171. Who is this idiot? He's actually exposing his enmity towards Jianchen at a time like this, and he's even saying that he wants to kill Jianchen. Doesn't he know that someone called Jianchen is currently taking revenge for Jianchen? Or is it that both his strength and background are enough to crush Mingdong? So he doesn't fear Mingdong's threat at all. I just happen to know this person. He's a supreme divine king from the Taoist sect of divine sound on the Skyfire Plain. His name is Jun Kong. I never thought he'd come to the Song Poseidon Palace as well. The Taoist sect of divine sound? I've heard Master mention this sect before. In the past, the Taoist sect of divine sound was a peak organization renowned throughout the saints' world because of the third ancestor. Even with the entire saints' world in perspective, very few people dared to provoke them. It's just a pity that after the third ancestor died, the Taoist sect of divine sound declined as well. Probably very few people still remember this sect in the saints' world. If the third ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound was still around, there really would be no one who would dare to offend Jun Kong in the Song Poseidon Palace. As for now, the divine kings gathered there discussed softly. They all looked at Jun Kong. They either sneered or shook their heads and sighed. As a divine king, Jun Kong was extremely powerful. Although the news of Jianchen's death had made him emotional, he immediately sensed it when so many people looked at him. He immediately sensed that something was wrong. The strange atmosphere made his heart tighten, and his laughter came to a halt. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful pulse of energy appeared. A strand of sword chi that was several meters long shot over. With the pure and dense power of the laws of destruction, it slashed towards Jun Kong mercilessly. Jun Kong's entire body suddenly shuddered when the sword chi locked onto him. He suddenly turned his head to look at the incoming sword chi. At the same time, his face was filled with confusion and sternness. The sword chi was so powerful that shocked him. In particular, the laws of destruction within the sword chi that seemed capable of obliterating everything gave him the misconception that he was invincible. A jade flute silently appeared in Jun Kong's hand. He was stern as he stood with the jade flute in his hand. As soon as he began to play, a soul-stirring sound rang out. It was as beautiful as heavenly music, reaching the depths of everyone's soul and intoxicating them. As the sound of the flute rang out, ripples visible to the naked eye appeared. They were like sharp arrows that shot toward the incoming sword chi. Boom! 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 The sound waves collided with the sword chi, producing a string of deafening booms. Jun Kong used his way of music to control the power of the flute to fend off the sword chi that contained the laws of destruction. However, the sword chi was just too powerful. With Jun Kong's strength as a divine king, dealing with it was still rather difficult. The several hundred sound waves he sent out in an instant only have the power of the sword chi. At that moment, the sword chi that contained the laws of destruction had already arrived before him. A vicious light flashed through Jun Kong's eyes. He bellowed out and swung the jade flute in his hand, smashing it against the sword chi that was only half as powerful as before with all the power of his cultivation. With a boom, the sword chi was finally dispersed by Jun Kong. However, Jun Kong was reduced to a horrible shape as well. His luxurious robes had become tattered in many places. When the two of them struck out, the shock waves of energy destroyed the stability of the volcanoes in the surroundings once again. Immediately, several dozen volcanoes erupted at the same time. Lava, mixed with many fire divine, Crystals fell from the sky as a dense rain of fire, frightening all the divine kings who were covered by the rain of fire. They all dodged in a hurry. That flute is quite impressive. It's actually resonated with my mind, and I can't help but become intoxicated by it, as expected of a supreme prodigy of the Taoist sect of divine sound. His mastery of music has indeed broadened my horizons. It's just that it's a little too short. In the distance, a supreme divine king could not help but praise. It's said that the Taoist sect of divine sound's music has stolen the mysteries of the world, and it can derive the ways of the world. I wonder if that's true. Let's not talk about anything else. Just that beautiful music is enough for me to pay a visit to the Taoist sect of divine sound. In that moment earlier, I was almost affected by the flute. Many divine kings discussed among themselves in the surroundings, but Jun Kong was in no mood to listen to their praises. At that moment, his face was sunken as he stared at the young man before him with an ugly expression. His excitement from Genshin's death had completely vanished. "Friend, may I ask how I've offended you for you to attack me for no reason?" Jun Kong clasped his fist and said with an ugly expression. His gaze towards the young man before him was filled with extremely deep fear. To no surprise, the young man before him was Ming Dong. The 5 divine generals followed closely behind Ming Dong. They were all emotionless, and their gazes were cold. "You seem to be very happy that Genshin is dead. What grievances do you have with Genshin? And who's this Mu you speak of?" Ming Dong stood before Jun Kong as his presence surged. He was extremely powerful as he spoke, coldly. Jun Kong hesitated. He had just entered Poseidon Palace, so he had no idea that Ming Dong was avenging Genshin. For a moment, he was rather unsure about the relationship between Ming Dong and Genshin. "Friend, this is between me and Genshin. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with you," Jun Kong said carefully. He had personally witnessed the young man clashing with over a dozen divine kings, and from how the young man did not seem to take the divine kings seriously at all. He could not afford to offend someone like that. "Is the Mu, or you speak of Shangguan Mu, Ming Dong continued to ask. When Ming Dong mentioned Shangguan Mu, Ai's name, Jun Kong's eyes immediately narrowed. He stared at the young man who seemed like a god of slaughter in shock as disbelief filled his face, although he did not dare to claim that he knew everything about Shangguan Mu. He had a rough idea. He knew that Shangguan Mu had come up from a lower world, and she had not been in the saint's world for very long. She was a nameless, insignificant figure. However, how did the powerful divine king know someone like that? This clearly did not make sense. If Shangguan Mu knew this person, Jun Kong would never believe it. Who knew how long this divine king had cultivated for? Shangguan Mu had only come to the saint's world recently, and her cultivation was nothing special. How did she know someone of such great status? Jun Kong did not reply, but Ming Dong already knew the answer from his expression alone. "I understand now. You covet Shangguan Mu's beauty, and because Genshin is Shangguan Mu's husband, he's stopping you from pursuing Shangguan Mu. As a result, you want Genshin to die. Am I right?" Ming Dong said coldly as his gaze became extremely piercing. Jun Kong's face changed, and he could not help but stagger backwards. He stared at Genshin in shock as his heart churned. Not only did this young man know about Shangguan Mu, but he even knew about the relationship between Shangguan Mu and Genshin. How was that possible? Even in the Taoist sect of divine sound, only the 2 elders and a few ancestors knew about the relationship between Shangguan Mu and Genshin. So how did this young man know about it? "Genshin is my brother who has gone through thick and thin with me, while Shangguan Mu is my sister-in-law. Not only do you want to take my sister-in-law, but you want to kill my brother as well. You're courting death," Ming Dong said through gritted teeth. His terrifying gaze was basically tempting to rip Jun Kong to pieces. He immediately raised his sword and swung it at Jun Kong with the laws of destruction. This time, Ming Dong struck out furiously, so it was much more powerful than before. Chapter 2172. Impossible, this is impossible, this is definitely impossible. Jun Kong shook his head and said softly. His shock had already reached its limit, making him extremely shocked. Whether it was Shangguan Mu or Genshin's origins, he knew everything. However, in his eyes, Genshin had always been as weak as an ant. Now that he suddenly possessed such a powerful brother, he was unable to accept this no matter what. He was even more unable to accept that the junior sister Mu, or he admired, was actually the sister-in-law of the Divine King before him. So there's actually a relationship like this between Ming Dong and Genshin. No wonder Genshin's death made Ming Dong go crazy, where he went as far as to offend those peak organizations just to kill the Divine Kings. As it turns out, he's actually a friend who has gone through thick and thin with him. A friend who has gone through thick and thin with him. That's a friendship where he can completely entrust his life to the other person. As a matter of fact, the other person's life is even more important than his own. Their friendship is so deep that it completely surpasses the friendship between fellow disciples. The Divine Kings in the surroundings came to a realization as well. However, Song Ying, Gong Zheng, and Bai Yi's heart sank as their faces became very ugly. The relationship between Genshin and Ming Dong was far deeper than they had expected. At this moment, Ming Dong's sword had already swung towards Jun Kong with the power of the laws of destruction. As the presence of destruction permeated the surroundings, it seemed like it wanted to destroy everything. Although Jun Kong was momentarily stunned, he was still a supreme God King who had made it onto the God King's throne after all. At the moment of life and death, he immediately reacted. With a flip of his hand, a palm-sized bell silently appeared in his hand before suddenly expanding to several meters in size. It completely enveloped him. Thump! When Ming Dong's strike with the laws of destruction landed on the bell, it immediately produced a heavy chime. The terrifying sound wave turned into visible ripples that expanded in all directions. This sound wave also contained an extremely strong offensive power. When the sound wave spread, it caused the sea of lava below to churn violently. Volcanoes began to erupt one after another. A large amount of lava turned into a rain of fire in the sky, one after another, and continued to rain down. Ming Dong placed his sword before himself to block the incoming sound wave. He stared at the undamaged bell coldly and said coldly, "Do you think I can't do anything to you just because you have a defensive god artifact?" As he said that, a set of armor silently appeared, protecting every inch of Ming Dong's body. When the lava rain landed on the armor, it actually failed to damage it at all. The armor was clearly a defensive god artifact. Afterwards, Ming Dong suddenly put away the supreme quality Saint Artifact sword in his hand and replaced it with a god artifact sword. Under the condensation of the laws of destruction, it immediately erupted with surging power, slashing at the bell viciously. Boom! This was an intense confrontation between two divine artifacts. The sound of thunder was deafening, and the terrifying energy shockwaves swept out like torrential waves. They wreaked havoc between heaven and earth, and even the rain of fire that filled the sky became erratic. The bell that trapped Jun Kong was knocked far away by Ming Dong's strike as well. It only stopped several thousand meters away. Jun Kong appeared below the bell. He stared at Ming Dong, who was shrouded in killing intent, with a sunken face. As the Divine King, the prodigy of the Taoist sect of divine sound, he obviously had his pride and dignity. Even though he knew about Ming Dong's great background, he still found it difficult to hold back his anger after being attacked by Ming Dong time and time again. Moreover, he could already tell that Ming Dong wanted to kill him. As for the Taoist sect of divine sound behind Ming Dong, it was clearly nothing more than a decoration now. It posed no threat at all. The sound of the jade flute rang out slowly. It was like a pillar of the heavens, beautiful like heavenly music. It slowly rang out with an enchanting charm. Jun Kong blocked the lava rain with the bell above his head. He stood below the bell and played the jade flute, using the way of music against his opponent. He used the sound of the flute to control his opponent's soul, disturbing their minds and messing up their souls. He used the sound waves as a sword, piercing through space and injuring his opponent's body. Jun Kong began to fight back as hard as he could against Ming Dong's killing intent. If you want to mess with my mind with just you, go cultivate for another few hundred years. Ming Dong snorted coldly. Right now, he was protected by a god artifact, which made him invulnerable. He was as valiant as a god of war as he wielded his god artifact sword. He smashed through the lava rain like a hot knife through butter and arrived before Jun Kong. The battle between the two of them was not exactly intense. Only the terrifying ripples of energy from the collision of the two god artifacts wreaked havoc in the surroundings, causing volcanoes to erupt. The sea of lava below them churned with surging waves. Scarlet flames filled the sky as red light filled the sky. Jun Kong remained unscathed from Ming Dong's numerous attacks with his defensive god artifact. However, using a god artifact was extremely taxing on any supreme divine king. He could not last for long at all. His face had already paled, showing signs of exhaustion. Boom! Finally, under another attack from Ming Dong, Jun Kong finally ran out of energy to maintain the defenses of the bell. He put it away and immediately vomited blood. He was heavily injured. "How dare you lay your hands on my brother's woman and my sister-in-law? You won't be spared today." Ming Dong's voice was cold. Killing intent surged as he put away his god artifact. He launched a barrage of attacks at Jun Kong with his fists. His fists and palms changed as his knees and legs danced. With great power, he unleashed a brutal, excruciating torture on Jun Kong's body. Although Ming Dong had no grievances with Jun Kong, Ming Dong's hatred towards him was even greater than the 8 divine kings who had attacked Jianshan. He wanted to torture Jun Kong properly before he died. Jun Kong was unable to fight back at all. He was completely suppressed by Ming Dong. Like a sandbag, he was thrown around in the air by Ming Dong's attacks. Not only was there no skin on his body, but all his bones and organs had been shattered by Ming Dong's fists as well. His bloodied face had already become twisted and deformed. Even his skull had cracked. He was in an extremely horrible state. Jun Kong's soul was still present, so he was not dead. He glared at Ming Dong furiously as his hatred surged, but there was nothing he could do. Chapter 2173. The surroundings were filled with people long ago. Many divine kings hovered high in the sky as they watched silently. Some of the more ordinary divine kings were extremely shocked when they witnessed Ming Dong's strength. Fear appeared in their eyes as they looked at Ming Dong. As for the divine kings, they remained emotionless and did nothing. They watched on calmly, and no one stepped forward to stop the battle. Even though their battle caused the volcanoes in the surroundings to erupt violently, they all acted like it had nothing to do with them. The retreat of the 20 or so divine kings had alarmed them. They truly realized that Ming Dong's background was probably not to be trifled with. Therefore, they naturally wouldn't provoke a powerful enemy just because of a small matter that was insignificant to them. Only when it was related to their own core interests would they step forward bravely, regardless of the consequences. At this moment, Ming Dong's interest in Jun Kong had waned. He stopped punching and kicking Jun Kong and drew his supreme quality saint artifact, sword again. Killing intent revolved around him as he stabbed at Jun Kong's forehead decisively. Jun Kong had lost his ability to fight long ago, and even his cultivation had been sealed up by Ming Dong through a secret technique. He was unable to dodge Ming Dong's attack at all. Even though many divine kings had gathered in the surroundings, including many from the Skyfar plane, no one stepped forward to help him. This was because they all understood Ming Dong's personality and methods. They knew that if they stepped forward now, not only would they not be able to save Jun Kong, but they would also be dragged into the matter as well. In the end, they would only invite trouble onto themselves. Stop! However, at this moment, a delicate voice suddenly rang out. It was gentle and pleasant, like the chirping of a skylark. Many of the god kings in the surroundings were stunned by the voice. Anyone could tell with a single glance that Ming Dong wanted to kill Jun Kong. No one could stop him. Once they stepped forward, they would definitely suffer a horrible fate. However, there just so happened to be someone who wasn't afraid of angering Ming Dong, stepping forward at a time like this. This immediately drew the attention of many divine king as they looked towards the source of the voice in surprise. The veiled Shangguan Mu shot over with lightning speed from afar with over a dozen divine king from the Taoist sect of divine sound. They directly flew towards Ming Dong. Ming Dong's attack towards Jun Kong's forehead came to a halt. He looked at the rapidly approaching Shangguan Mu and naturally recognized her with a single glance. Shangguan Mu was the first person Ming Dong had met since they parted on the Tianyuan continent. Originally, the meeting between the two of them was something worth celebrating, but Jianqin's death made it impossible for Ming Dong to feel happy no matter what. All he could do was suppress the flames of hatred and vengeance in his heart, filling his entire chest. Sister-in-law, you want to save him? Or do you want to kill him yourself? Ming Dong pointed the tip of his sword at Jun Kong's forehead. His killing intent did not decrease at all as he turned around and asked Shangguan Mu. He was not excited at all, nor was there any joy. His emotions did not fluctuate at all. His voice was extremely cold. In reality, Ming Dong could tell that Shangguan Mu's current cultivation had already reached the level of a divine king. Ming Dong was extremely puzzled by how Shangguan Mu had reached such a level of cultivation in such a short amount of time. At the same time, he had many questions. However, the death of his best friend filled him with grief and indignation, almost destroying his rationality. All that was left in his heart was revenge. 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 Shangguan Mu stared at Ming Dong closely. Her eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. She knew that Jianqin had always been thinking about Ming Dong, who had suddenly vanished on the 9th floor of the Anita Tower. After coming to the Saint's world, he had thought about looking for Ming Dong more than once. However, she had never thought that Jianqin, who had vanished from the Tianyuan continent for so long, would suddenly appear in Poseidon Palace and possess such a powerful cultivation. Jianqin, I finally found you. Did you know that Jianqin had always been thinking about you while you were gone? As a matter of fact, when he first arrived in the Saint's world and before he had truly become powerful, he wanted to embark on the long journey to find you, Shangguan Mu said softly. She did not mention Jun Kong. Ming Dong's eyes were filled with sorrow. He closed his eyes in pain as 2 tears rolled down uncontrollably. How could he not think about Jianqin, who had gone through life and death with him on the Tianyuan continent? However, when he embarked on his journey to find Jianqin, all he received was news of Jianqin's death. Ming Dong sucked in a deep breath. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with emotionless coldness. He said again, Sister-in-law, did you stop me from killing him earlier to save him? Or did you want to kill him personally? Shangguan Mu's gaze finally landed on Jun Kong. Her expression did not change at all as she looked at Jun Kong, who was like a dead dog. She said, Jun Kong is my senior brother from the same sect. I am indebted to his master. Ming Dong, let him go. Let him go. Ming Dong's gaze suddenly became piercing. He called out emotionally, do you know that this person already wants to kill my brother, yet you want me to let him go? Can you face my brother like this? Can you face my brother's soul in heaven? At this moment, Ming Dong seemed to have lost his mind. He was like a mad lion. Shangguan Mu's words had made him extremely disappointed and furious. If I insist on killing him, will you stop me? Ming Dong roared out. He was extremely emotional. I will. Shangguan Mu said calmly, Jun Kong's master is one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound. I am indebted to him in the past. I saved him this time because of his master. It has nothing to do with Jun Kong himself. From now on, even if Jun Kong encounters danger again, it won't have anything to do with me." Ming Dong sucked in a few deep breaths after hearing Shangguan Mu's explanation. He slowly calmed down and said, "All right, if that's the case, I'll spare him for sister-in-law's sake." Ming Dong stowed his sword away and stared at Jun Kong coldly. He directly kicked Jun Kong away and bellowed out, "Piss off!" Jun Kong's body was caught by the Divine King from the Taoist sect of Divine Sound in a fluster. Various healing pills were poured into Jun Kong's mouth without any regard for the cost. Ming Dong did not exchange too many pleasantries with Shangguan Mu. Instead, he turned around and made his way towards Gongzheng by Yi and Songying. Although his presence was powerful, his figure seemed bleak and lonely. Chapter 2174. As a supreme prodigy of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound and a supreme Divine King below the Divine King, it was already difficult for Jun Kong to endure Ming Dong's humiliating beating. He had already become furious. Now that he saw his junior whom he admired, not only did she not console him after he had suffered such great injuries, but she even treated him coldly instead, cutting off all ties with him. Jun Kong was immediately infuriated. He could not help but vomit blood. Afterwards, Jun Kong seemed to be greatly provoked. He laughed aloud with his distorted mouth and mumbled, "Jianqin? You're still thinking about Jianqin? Ha 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 ha, Shangguan Mu. You probably don't know, but the Jianqin you've always been thinking about is already dead. He's really dead this time. His corpse is buried in the lava below your feet. You can forget about seeing Jianqin for the rest of your life." Ha ha ha. Jun Kong became more and more emotional as he spoke, as if Jianqin's death was the only thing that could make him feel better and relieve his pain. However, to Jun Kong's disappointment, he did not see any grief from Shangguan Mu. She remained emotionless, without any emotions at all. "I'll leave Jun Kong to you. Don't follow me. I don't need your protection," Shangguan Mu said to the Divine Kings around Jun Kong. The Divine Kings from the Taoist sect of Divine Sound looked at each other. They were troubled, having no idea what to do. On the other side, Gongzheng, Bai Yi, and Songying's expressions immediately became extremely ugly when they saw Ming Dong slowly approach them like a god of slaughter. Now, the three of them no longer hoped that the supreme Divine Kings gathered here would step forward to stop Ming Dong. After everything that had happened, Ming Dong's current might was enough to suffocate them, the three Divine Kings. Perhaps because he could see Gongzheng's worry. Jia Na patted Gongzheng's shoulder and said sternly, "Gongzheng, don't worry too much. Since you're the successor of the solitary sword lineage, I definitely won't let anything happen to you here. Leave everything to me." With that, Jia Na took a step forward and looked at Ming Dong. He said sternly, "Ming Dong, I hope you can stop before you go too far. Now that so many of us have gathered here, we are not here to see you seek revenge. Don't let your personal grudge affect us all and delay us from doing more important things." With that, a powerful presence radiated from Jia Na, blanketing the surroundings, causing the lava below him to churn violently like a tsunami. Jia Na's presence was so powerful that it had far surpassed most supreme Divine Kings. After all, he was an expert who ranked 99th before the Divine King. Just this ranking alone was enough to make him look down on all opponents of the same level. As expected, as soon as Jia Na's presence appeared, it immediately made the eyes of many Divine Kings narrow. Fear appeared in the depths of their eyes. "You want to stop me?" Ming Dong stepped through the air, advancing step by step. He glared at Jia Na and said with a voice filled with killing intent, "You are indeed very powerful, but you still can't stop me from killing them. Ming Dong, if we start fighting, we obviously won't be able to avoid the collision of god artifacts. That will lead to the eruption of volcanoes in the entire space. At that time, there's probably not a single place on the 8th floor that's safe. Everyone will be affected. Do you really want to become the public enemy of all of us? Jia Na growled. Ming Dong's origins were still a mystery to him, so he was unwilling to clash with Ming Dong so easily. We've come here to find that little girl. If you continue fighting, won't you be getting in the way of all of us? Friend Ming Dong, I hope you can stop right now. If you want to fight, go somewhere else. Don't get in the way of all of us. At the same time, many powerful and rather conceited supreme divine kings spoke up to stop the battle. However, even more god kings retreated far away. They all arrived at the entrances to the 8th floor. They were prepared to leave as soon as the two of them began fighting. Let's go. Let's hide for now. This Ming Dong comes from the heavenly palace of Bishing. Don't offend him over something so trivial. A few supreme divine kings who knew about Ming Dong's origins retreated far away with their guards and retainers as soon as possible. Ming Dong and Jia Na were already on the verge of drawing their swords. They could clash at any moment. Ming Dong, don't be rash. At this moment, Shangguan Mu said. She looked at Ming Dong from afar, and her lips moved slightly. A voice that only Ming Dong could hear rang out. Ming Dong shuddered violently. He could not help but tremble gently. He arrived before Shangguan Mu in a flash and said excitedly, "Hey, are you telling the truth? Then how did you know?" "I can sense it. Even though it's just a vague feeling, it can't be wrong. Don't forget that he still has that tower on him." Shangguan Mu did not say it aloud. Instead, she directly communicated with Ming Dong secretly. She was not afraid of others hearing it at all. "Don't tell anyone about this for now. I heard that there's a very important little girl by Genshin's side, and there are so many supreme divine kings gathered here who have specially come for the little girl. If you reveal it too early, it'll be detrimental to Genshin." "Fantastic, fantastic. Ha ha ha. Why didn't I think of that tower? If I've guessed correctly, that's my master's treasure." In the blink of an eye, the gloominess in Ming Dong's heart completely vanished. He was extremely excited, and his mood immediately improved. There was no shocking, baleful aura around him. At this moment, Ming Dong looked completely different. "Brother, since you're still here, then I'll wait here for you to come out. I'll leave the rest of your enemies to you." Ming Dong sat down cross-legged and swallowed several god-tier pills in succession, calming his heart and regulating his breathing. He had paid a very great price to use Fate Sight to search for his enemies before going through several intense battles. Not only had he consumed a lot of energy, but he had even injured his core. Fortunately, as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, he possessed a large number of god-tier pills. Making a full recovery was nothing difficult. On the other side, Jana, Bai Yi, Gongzheng, and Sangying all let out a sigh of relief when they saw Ming Dong finally stop. In the surroundings, the divine king who had hidden far away all returned when they saw Ming Dong finally stop. Very soon, they began making plans to enter the lava to search for the girl. Before long, peace returned to the 8th floor of the Poseidon Palace. However, everyone knew that this peace was only on the surface because the volcanoes on this floor were very unstable. They could erupt with the slightest provocation. Now that so many divine king had gathered, even if they concealed their presences, they would still affect the space here. They could break the balance at any time. Shangguan Mu sat in the air by herself. She was in no hurry to enter the 12th floor. Instead, she stared at the lava below eagerly, waiting for Genshin to emerge. "Shangguan Mu, I never thought you'd break through to the Divine King realm in such a short amount of time. You've really taken me by surprise." However, at this moment, a gentle voice rang out from beside Shangguan Mu. An alluring woman in a green dress stood beside Shangguan Mu as she smiled at her. Shangguan Mu was surprised. She had always been on guard, but she failed to sense the woman's approach at all. "You are." Shangguan Mu stared at the unfamiliar woman in surprise and doubt. She had never seen this woman before, but she could sense a familiar presence from her. Chapter 2175. It's only been a few hundred years, yet you don't remember me? The woman maintained a gentle smile the entire time. It was enough to revive everything and make flowers bloom. Even the erupting volcanoes in the surroundings seemed to settle down slightly before her smile. Very soon, a thought flashed through Shangguan Er's head when she sensed the familiar presence from the woman. She became surprised and asked, "You're the elven god tree from the elven race?" Back on the Tianyuan continent, Shangguan I was familiar with the elven god tree. She had an extremely deep impression of it. This was because if the elven god tree had not taken action during the crisis of the world, it would have been impossible for that world to survive. I'm not a tree. When I was in the lower world, I used my remaining life force to condense a tree of life. I had no other choice. The woman chuckled gently. Shangguan I had already learned a few things about Aladona from Jianchen. Now that she had confirmed her identity, she immediately stood up and bowed towards Aladona, greeting her as senior. There's no need to call me senior. Although I'm much older than you, age doesn't determine status in the Saints' world. Right now, we're both in the Divine King realm. Moreover, with your talent, it won't take you too long to surpass me. As a result, we can treat each other as equals. Of course, if you think highly of me, you can call me sister. We can treat each other as sisters, said Shangguan On the surface, she seemed calm, but in reality, she was not calm at all. This was all because Shangguan Er's rate of cultivation had completely exceeded her expectations. Back when she left the Tianyuan continent with the war god of the god clan, Taita, Shangguan was only at the origin realm. Only a short while had passed, yet Shangguan I had already reached the Divine King realm. It was not just Shangguan even Mingdong nearby and Jianchen, who everyone discussed, had become Divine King experts in such a short amount of time. They progressed so quickly that it was truly astounding. Even Aladona, who had seen many supreme prodigies, was shocked. Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. I've come this time under the esteemed war god's orders to find Jianchen. The trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace is only for me to establish a network of connections so that I can make preparations for finding Jianchen in the future. But what I didn't expect was that not long after I entered the Azure Poseidon Palace, I actually heard news of Jianchen. I didn't expect that he would also come to the Azure Poseidon Palace. This is really a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance. Aladona sighed softly and sighed with emotion. The war god. Shangguan murmured softly. The war god is Taita. He's the supreme king of our god clan. Aladona could not help but show respect when the war god was mentioned. Their god clan was a rather special race. Although the god clan also followed the law of the jungle, where the strong ruled supreme, the war god was the only exception. The war gods of the divine race, also known as the war gods of the divine race, were born from the heavens and earth. In every generation, only one war god would appear. There would never be a scene where two war gods appeared at the same time. Every time the previous war god fell, the next war god would be born. However, without any exceptions, every war god would become a supreme existence as soon as they returned to the god clan, regardless of their cultivation. Even the hall elders who reigned supreme in the god clan would have to listen to the war god's orders. Everyone here is saying that Jianchen is already dead, but I know that Jianchen will never die here. Aladona looked at the lava below as she smiled faintly. Jianchen has that tower on him. As long as he hides in there, the mere lava won't be able to harm him at all. I think he's living more happily down there than anyone else. Adriana said softly, aside from Shangguan there was no one else who could hear what she said. Sister, do you know the origins of that tower? Shangguan stared at Aladona. She already knew that Gentian's tower was extremely tough and of extremely high quality. However, Gentian had never told anyone about the exact details of the tower. Aladona nodded. I wasn't certain about the tower when I was on the Tianyuan continent. After returning to the Saints' world, I looked through many records, and only then did I confirm it. Aladona suddenly became stern when she reached there. She said, secretly, the tower is extremely important. The fewer people who know about it, the better. Otherwise, not only will Gentian be killed, but all the people around Gentian who have seen the tower will be doomed as well. Don't ask about the details. I know you won't tell anyone. But if you raise the attention of the peak experts of the Saints' world, they have many methods to control the thoughts and wills of others. They can learn everything they want to know effortlessly. However, it's fortunate that basically all the people who can recognize the tower with a single glance are primordial realm experts. No one should be able to recognize the tower when Gentian exposed it in Poseidon Palace. Sister Mu, or let's go. Who knows when Gentian will come out? There are fortuitous encounters everywhere in Poseidon Palace. I'll take you around first and see if I can increase your strength. Once Gentian shows himself, there'll be a lot of bloodshed. Even with Mingdong there, he might not be able to hold on. If you want to help him, you need to become stronger, or you'll just become a burden. Shangguan Mu, and Aladona left the 8th floor. Mingdong and the 5 divine generals remained there, silently waiting for Gentian to appear. As for the divine king gathered on the floor, they had already formed groups of varying numbers. They used everyone's strength to unleash the full power of the god artifact as they began to search for Shao Man in the lava. At this moment, Gentian was happily collecting fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava where even god artifacts could be melted. Every time he cast his net, he would catch a small mountain of fire divine crystals, causing all the fire divine crystals in a large region to vanish. Gentian moved as he collected them. He had already moved far away from his original position. Even he had no idea how many fire divine crystals there were in the Inata Tower now. He only knew that it was in the hundreds of millions. However, Gentian was not satisfied. He knew that 100 million fire divine crystals was not a lot when converted to 5-colored divine crystals, so he did not stop collecting fire divine crystals. However, at this moment, just when Gentian was about to return to the Inata Tower with a large pile of fire divine crystals, the lava in the surroundings suddenly pulsed violently. A great sense of danger suddenly appeared, approaching him at an unbelievable speed. Gentian's face changed. The sense of danger was so great that it was suffocating. It was extremely terrifying. Even his blood seemed to have frozen at that moment. Gentian's face changed several times. Without any hesitation, he immediately abandoned the fire divine crystals he had just collected and returned to the Inata Tower as quickly as he could. Boom! As soon as Gentian vanished, a great rumble rang out. The Inata Tower had suffered a powerful attack. Even Gentian, who hid in the Inata Tower, could clearly sense the tower tremble gently through his connection with the tower. Gentian was shocked. He had already refined the 5th floor of the Inata Tower, making it even more powerful than before. Let alone the Divine King, who wielded a god artifact, it could not shake it at all. He was confident that the Inata Tower could even withstand the attacks of some infinite primes. However, the Inata Tower actually trembled gently at this moment. Just how powerful was the attack that the Inata Tower had just endured? Chapter 2176. Gentian stood at the entrance on the 1st floor of the Inata Tower. He looked outside through the damaged door as his face rapidly changed. He was surprised and doubtful. Even now, he struggled to believe that he had been attacked, and the attack was so powerful that it had completely surpassed the limits of the Divine King. The primordial realm experts were forbidden from entering the Azure Poseidon Palace. This rule had never been broken in the several million years since the palace had been opened. Moreover, he was at the very bottom of the lava. The temperature there was so great that even some god artifacts of lower quality would melt. Even some primordial realm experts would not be able to venture any deeper. Jianqin, what's happening? Kea appeared before Jianqin, silently as he stared outside sternly. Jianqin shook his head, silently. He was extremely stern. He had no idea who the attacker was. As a matter of fact, he was not even sure if he had been attacked by a living being or if he had accidentally come into contact with some formation, resulting in the formation's counterattack. Boom! 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 However, at this moment, the terrifying attack arrived once again. It came from right in front of him, and every single strike possessed devastating power, causing the lava in the surroundings to churn violently. They struck the damaged Anata Tower heavily. The attacks were just too violent and too powerful. Even Jianqin, who hid in the Anata Tower, could clearly sense just how shocking the attacks outside were. The Anata Tower shook violently. Every single attack from the outside could shake the tower. After enduring the terrifying attacks, the Anata Tower began to shake violently. Afterwards, it lost its balance and began to tilt slowly, falling towards the ground. Jianqin could clearly sense every change in the Anata Tower. He did not try to stabilize the Anata Tower on purpose. Instead, he allowed it to fall. However, his heart had become heavy, and his complexion was very ugly. Now, he was certain that he had not come into contact with some formation. Instead, he had truly been attacked by an unknown enemy. However, what he did not understand was why the enemy was still able to remain in the Azure Poseidon Palace when they were so powerful. Boom! With a heavy sound, the collapsed Anata Tower struck the ground heavily with unimaginable weight. Immediately, the ground shook violently as if a great earthquake had occurred. Huge cracks spread out in all directions like a spider's web. The endless lava churned violently. At this moment, on the surface of the lava, there were balls of light that were slowly and cautiously making their way into the depths of the lava. Every single ball of light represented a defensive god artifact. Inside each ball of light were several dozen divine kings. They worked together to push the god artifact's defenses to the maximum to fend off the surrounding lava. At the bottom of the lava, it was indeed possible to melt a divine artifact, but the melting process would take a long time. As long as the divine kings did not reach the very bottom of the lava, they could indeed survive for some time under the power of the god artifacts. It was just that they would not be able to last for long. However, at this moment, the lava in the surroundings suddenly began to shake violently. Not only did the pressure on the divine kings immediately increase, but the flames that only existed at the bottom of the lava surged up as well. Enveloped by the flames, many of the barriers created by the god artifacts shattered in just a few seconds. As a result, the divine kings hiding underground were directly exposed to the lava. Immediately, miserable cries rang out from the lava. All the divine kings in the lava no longer dared to remain. As if they were fleeing for their lives, they all charged up as quickly as they could. Very soon, all the divine kings in the lava left. They all hovered in the air as they stared at the churning sea of lava below in lingering fear. In a short amount of time, many of them had become injured to varying degrees. Some of them had even been burned beyond recognition. Their entire bodies burned with surging flames. Their armor, which was clearly a supreme quality saint artifact, had been melted into a pool of liquid. What's going on down there? Why has the lava suddenly become so violent? Those flames are just too terrifying. They should only exist at the bottom of the lava. So why did they suddenly surge up? Many supreme divine kings hovered in the air as they stared at the sea of lava below in lingering fear. If it were not for the fact that they had fled quickly, they probably would not have survived even if they were supreme god kings on the god king's throne. They would have been burnt to a crisp. However, this incident had left a shadow in the hearts of many divine kings. For a moment, no one dared to go down again. The terrifying attack at the bottom of the lava had stopped. Jianqin hid in the Anata Tower and used his connection with the tower to sense the outside world. After confirming that the attack would not appear again, he slowly controlled the Inata tower to float up and approach the lava carefully. After traveling a few kilometers, Jianshin's mind suddenly shuddered. He immediately controlled the Inata tower to stop and calm down. He carefully sensed the surroundings before gritting his teeth and leaving the Inata tower again, appearing at the bottom of the lava. However, this time, Jianshin appeared behind the Inata tower. That way, even if the powerful attack came again, the indestructible Inata tower would block it, giving him enough time to hide. However, as soon as Jianshin left the Inata tower, his heart skipped a beat. His eyes immediately narrowed to the size of needles. Up ahead, he saw a huge head. At this moment, the head was almost stuck to the Inata tower. Its eyes, which were 3 meters wide, stared at the Inata tower without blinking. They were filled with surprise. "It's a lizard!" Jianshin's mind shuddered. He saw what it was with a single glance. It was actually a lizard that could survive at the bottom of the lava. However, it was also at this moment that the lizard sensed Jianshin's existence. Its huge eyes immediately locked onto Jianshin. Even though Jianshin was in the lava, he felt his body turn cold under the lizard's gaze. It was as if his entire body had stiffened. His blood seemed to have frozen as a suffocating sense of danger suddenly appeared. Jianshin had already made preparations to return to the Inata tower at any time. Without any hesitation, he directly entered the Inata tower with a flash. Boom! As soon as he entered the Inata tower, it produced a heavy sound. Clearly, the lizard had launched a violent attack. Jianshin sucked in a few deep breaths within the Inata tower. He looked outside and became extremely stern. This had completely overturned his understanding of the Poseidon Palace. He had never thought that there would actually be such a terrifying lizard at the bottom of the lava. No one had discovered it, even after all these years. He was certain that if the news of the lizard spread through the Poseidon Palace, it would cause a huge uproar. "Jianshin, what's the situation outside?" Kea asked. Jianshin immediately told Kea everything he saw. As expected, Kea became stern after learning that there was an extraordinarily terrifying lizard outside. "With the lizard in the way, it'll be very difficult for you to collect fire divine crystals," Kea said with a frown. Chapter 2177. This floor is so large. Since there's a lizard here, I'll go somewhere else. Jianshin said before immediately retreating with the Inata tower. He moved far away from the region in an attempt to avoid the lizard. The damaged Inata tower moved through the lava silently like a ghost. Under Jianshin's control, it arrived several million kilometers away, basically arriving at the other end of the 8th floor. Only then did it stop. "It should be safe here," Jianshin murmured to himself. Through his connection with the Inata tower, he secretly sensed the situation outside before leaving with a flash. "Be careful, just in case the lizard follows us," Kea said from behind as he showed some concern and worry. However, this time, Jianshin only left for a few seconds before returning to the Inata tower with a sunken face. He said sternly, "The lizard is still outside. It's followed us all the way here. The obstructions at the bottom of the lava are just too great. I can't sense its existence in the tower at all." Jianshin was in a very bad mood. The lizard was hostile towards him, attacking him as soon as it saw him. Its attacks were devastating. It was so powerful that even some regular primordial realm experts would be slain in a single strike, let alone the Divine King. As a result, he was unable to collect fire divine crystals anymore. Fire divine crystals littered the ground outside, yet he was unable to collect any more. This would be a painful torture to anyone. Jianshin did not give up. He continued to move the Inata tower through the lava, switching to several different locations. However, what made him exasperated was that no matter where he moved, the lizard remained fixated on him. More accurately, it was fixated on the Inata tower. It followed the Inata tower the entire time and struck the Inata tower from time to time, causing it to tremble. "Looks like that giant lizard won't be leaving anytime soon." "Forget it. Since I can't go out, I'll go into seclusion here for a while. Jianchen sighed inside. He explained some matters to Kea before visiting Ziyun and Xiaoman. He then made his way to the 12th floor all by himself and entered seclusion. His comprehension of the way of the sword had already reached the major achievement of sword spirit, so he could condense the 3rd strand of profound sword chi. He had been busy collecting fire divine crystals before, so he naturally did not have the time to condense the 3rd strand of profound sword chi. Now that there was a terrifyingly powerful lizard standing guard outside, he was trapped in the Inata Tower, unable to leave. He could only spend his time cultivating. Jianchen had already condensed the profound sword chi twice, so he was already familiar with the process. Very soon, he entered the condensing process. While Jianchen was in seclusion, Kea, Ziyun, and Xiaoman did not sit around either. They all entered a state of cultivation. In particular, Xiaoman cultivated even more diligently after what had happened in the Poseidon Palace. Her talent was not weak, but because she was just too young and had not cultivated for a long time, she was only at the mortal realm. Now that she had made up her mind to cultivate arduously, coupled with a tremendous amount of cultivation resources from Ziyun, Xiaoman's rate of improvement could only be described as tremendous. Very soon, she broke through the mortal realm and reached sainthood. Ziyun had just obtained the legacy of a chaotic prime recently, so she used this rare moment of peace to absorb the legacy as quickly as she could. In the air above the sea of lava, the many god kings gathered there did not leave. Most of them were divine kings who had entered later. They had all come for the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace. Now that they had confirmed that Xiaoman was the key, they naturally would not give up on searching for her. However, the lava had not been peaceful recently. It would tremble violently from time to time, drawing out the flames at the bottom of the lava. As a result, they did not dare to go down so easily. They all waited for the moment when the lava completely calmed down. Time passed in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. On this day, the entire space on the 12th floor of the Inata Tower suddenly became extremely bright. It was like a scorching sun hanging high in the sky, shining down with radiance. It illuminated the entire world. An extremely powerful sword intent radiated from the center of the 12th floor. Jianchen sat below a huge stone tablet there. A finger-sized strand of sword chi hovered above his head. It seemed to be filled with intelligence, revolving from time to time as it radiated with a chilling sword intent. At this moment, there was a flash of light, and the finger-sized strand of sword chi suddenly vanished. In a single moment, it had entered Jianchen's soul, settling down with 2 other strands of sword chi of the same size and appearance. Jianchen slowly opened his eyes as faint joy filled his face. After 3 years of seclusion, he had successfully condensed a 3rd strand of profound sword chi. He could clearly sense that the power of the 2 strands of sword chi before him had increased slightly the moment he condensed the 3rd strand of sword chi. Afterwards, he looked at the huge stone tablet beside him. The stone tablet was the core of the Inata Tower. Only by completely refining the stone tablet could he truly control the Inata Tower. I wonder if I can refine the 6th floor with my current strength. Jianchen stared at the stone tablet as he murmured inside. After a moment of thought, he placed his hands on the stone tablet firmly and attempted to refine the 6th floor. However, he soon gave up. Refining the 6th layer was thousands of times more difficult than refining the 5th layer. After a series of attempts, he realized that even if his cultivation improved, he might not be able to refine the 6th layer, let alone refining it with his current cultivation level. It looks like I can only try it once my cultivation reaches the level of an infinite prime. Jianchen sighed softly. With a thought, he vanished from the 12th floor. When he reappeared, he was already on the 1st floor, appearing beside Kei silently. He did not leave the Inata Tower to check whether the lizard was still there or not. Although he had been refining profound sword chi in seclusion for the past 3 years, his senses towards the Anata Tower had not weakened at all. He could clearly sense that the Anata Tower would shake violently from time to time. Chapter 2178. Every time the Cerulean Poseidon Palace opened, it would only last for 10 years. Half of the 10 years had already passed, so Genshin knew that it would probably be very difficult for him to collect fire divine crystals in the coming days. He turned his head slightly and gazed into the distance. When he saw the mountainous pile of fire divine crystals, he immediately calmed down slightly. He knew that there would not be a lot of 5-color divine crystals if he exchanged these fire divine crystals for them. However, at the very least, it would be enough for him to take a few interplanar teleportation formations. You've emerged. Kea slowly opened his eyes and looked at Genshin beside him. He continued, Do you need me for something? Genshin nodded and laughed dryly in a rather unnatural manner. The lizard is still guarding outside, so I can't leave either. I can only stay here. Oh, right, Kea! I see that you seem to have some understanding of the use of laws. The same laws of fire and laws of destruction are used by you, yet they are extraordinarily powerful, far exceeding your current level of cultivation. May I ask how you managed to do that? Genshin had become curious about Kea's use of laws very early on. If his grasp and usage of the laws of the sword could reach the same level as Kea's usage of the laws of fire and laws of destruction, his battle prowess would rise to a whole new level. Although he had stayed at the bottom of the lava for several years now, so he had no idea about the situation in the Cerulean Poseidon Palace, it was not difficult for him to guess. He knew that since the 8 divine kings and the many spectating divine kings knew about Xiaoman, it was impossible to keep it a secret. Perhaps everyone knew about Xiaoman's mysteries now. However, Xiaoman was by his side. Unless he gave up on Xiaoman, he would come into conflict with all the divine kings sooner or later once he left. He would not be able to deal with such a situation with his chaotic body that had just broken through to the 12th layer. As a result, he urgently needed to increase his strength. I don't know exactly how I did it. It's just a feeling. She slowly raised her right hand and said, Genshin, I'll slow down the speed at which I condense the laws. I'll show you. With that, Kea began to slowly condense the power of the laws of destruction. This time, the speed at which she condensed the laws was extremely slow. People could clearly sense the omnipresent power of laws gathering towards her finger from all directions, slowly condensing into a ball of destructive power of laws. Genshin's eyes narrowed. He discovered that Kea's process of condensing the laws was not much different from the other divine kings. There was nothing special about it, but when the laws of destruction were condensed in her hands, they were clearly purer than the other divine kings. It felt like Kea was not just an early divine king, but a late divine king. This was because the laws of destruction she had condensed were so powerful that they were definitely on par with the late divine king. Laws are also a form of power. Using this power requires skill as well, Genshin said softly. As she said that, the laws of destruction condensed between her fingers silently changed shape. It was no longer a form of pure power. Instead, it gradually turned into a rune. As soon as the rune was formed, it immediately gave off a terrifying pulse that made even Genshin shiver. He could sense a great threat from the rune, one that was no weaker than the supreme divine kings he had clashed with in the past. I'll show you a few more times. I don't know how to pass on this method to you accurately, so this is all I can do right now. Kea dispersed the laws of destruction on her hand and condensed them again using the same steps. Not only was Genshin the person Kea trusted the most, but he was also her best friend, the only person she was most familiar with. As a result, she held nothing back from Genshin. She passed on everything she knew to him, trying it over and over again tirelessly. Genshin slowly closed his eyes and opened his mind. He sensed every single step and detail of Kea's method of condensing the laws of destruction. He wanted to understand the mysteries behind it, so that he could increase his comprehension of the laws of the sword. Gradually, Jianqin entered a state of selflessness. In his hazy state, he felt like he was submerged in an ocean filled with the laws of destruction, being tightly wrapped around. Not only did he not feel threatened or uneasy in the ocean of the laws of destruction, but he instead felt warm, like an infant in his mother's embrace. Furthermore, he felt as if he wanted to fuse his entire body into the ocean. He wanted to become a part of the ocean, a drop of water in the ocean. At the same time, a faint power of the laws of destruction silently condensed around Jianqin, revolving around Jianqin. Kea stared at Jianqin in shock as she sat opposite Jianqin. She murmured, he's actually comprehended the laws of destruction. After who knew how long, Jianqin finally roused from the wondrous state. As soon as he roused, he immediately sensed the changes that had occurred to him. Not only could he clearly sense the omnipresent power of the laws of the sword that filled the surroundings, but he could also sense the power of the laws of destruction. Jianqin was surprised. He immediately attempted to condense the power of the laws of destruction. As expected, as soon as he willed it, the laws of destruction rapidly gathered. I've grasped the laws of destruction? Jianqin was filled with disbelief. He originally wanted to understand the mysteries of Kea's usage of the laws through her, but he had never thought that he would successfully comprehend the laws of destruction. Kea, how long did it take me? Jianqin asked nervously. He was immersed in the wondrous state, where he had forgotten everything. He could not sense the flow of time at all. He was afraid that he had taken too long to comprehend the laws of destruction. Half a year. Only half a year? That's good. That's good. Jianqin exhaled in relief. He finally stopped worrying. Master, the way of the sword is your main focus. You have to focus on the way of the sword. Only then can you reach the peak in the shortest amount of time possible. The voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jianqin's head. Jianqin's comprehension of the laws of destruction worried the two sword spirits. They were afraid that it would slow down Jianqin's progress in the way of the sword. Ziying and Qing Suo understood that Jianqin would comprehend many laws sooner or later, but they were more willing to see Jianqin comprehend many laws after he had become an expert who could shake up an entire region. By then, there would not be a lot of people who could threaten Jianqin. He would be able to comprehend many laws without any worries. It would not be like right now, filled with danger at all times. The slightest carelessness could lead to his death. Please listen to Xiaoyao's prestige. Once there are any updates in the future, Xiaoyao will inform you through prestige. Search. Xingxing Xiao 110, it's not complicated. It's Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a phone number. You can also find it by searching for Xiaoyao's pseudonym. To read the latest novel without error, please visit Chapter 2179. Ziying, Qing Suo, don't worry. I won't disappoint you. Jianqin secretly communicated with the sword spirits. Even though comprehending the laws of destruction was only an accident, Jianqin did not regret it at all. This was because comprehending two laws would definitely make his battle prowess much greater than comprehending a single law. The only flaw was that he had only just comprehended the laws of destruction. His usage and comprehension of the laws of destruction remained at a rudimentary level. However, Jianqin believed that he would be able to raise his comprehension of the laws of destruction to the level of the Divine King before too long. At that time, he would be able to use both the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction. Coupled with the strength of his chaotic force, his battle prowess would undoubtedly rise to a whole new level. My comprehension of the laws of destruction has almost reached the mid-Divine King. Jianqin, you've only just comprehended the laws of destruction, so your usage of the laws of destruction is still at a rudimentary level. I'll inscribe my own comprehension and help you increase your comprehension of the laws of destruction, Kea said. She found a tough stone slab and slowly closed her eyes. Immediately, A powerful presence radiated from her body. Her hair fluttered without any wind as the power of the laws of destruction silently condensed around Kea. In Kea's head, her comprehension of the laws of destruction, from the very beginning to her current level of the Divine King, rapidly flashed through like scenes. In the end, it condensed into a profound imprint that contained endless laws on her finger. As soon as the imprint formed, the laws of destruction around Kea immediately began to violently pulse as if they had been greatly disturbed. They became extremely unstable. At this moment, Kea's gaze suddenly became extremely sharp. With a deep bellow, the imprint that had condensed in her hand immediately shot out as a black streak of light, striking the stone slab. There was no deafening roar, nor was there any terrifying destructive power. Kea's seemingly astonishing attack was only loud as thunder, but small as raindrops. It only left an incomparably clear and mysterious mark on the stone wall. Soon after, Kea's body swayed and he staggered, almost falling to the ground. His face was somewhat pale, and there was a hint of weakness between his brows. It was obvious that this attack had taken a huge toll on her. "Kea, why do you have to do this?" Jianchen immediately arrived in front of Kea, full of concern. He immediately took out several recovery-type medicinal pills and fed them to Kea. He naturally knew what Kea had done. He had done the same to the Tianyuan family in the past. He had used the same method to leave behind a scar that contained the mysteries of the way of the sword for Shiyu. This method was called imparting. It was the method of imparting one's comprehension of laws in the clearest and simplest way possible for others to comprehend. Although this method could allow others to comprehend the mysteries of the laws in the easiest way possible, not only was it extremely taxing on the user, but it was also extremely risky. The slightest carelessness could harm the soul. Furthermore, not everyone would be able to benefit from the Tao imparting imprint. The Tao imparting imprint merely displayed the great Tao of heaven and earth in the clearest and most direct manner. Whether one could grasp it or not still depended on one's comprehension ability. As a result, even some masters and disciples would not leave behind imprints like this so easily in the saint's world, regardless of whether it could achieve the desired result. Just the risk involved was enough to make many experts shrink back. I can't describe the method of using laws, nor can I find an accurate method to impart it to you. Now that you've comprehended the laws of destruction, all I can help you with is leaving behind a seed of my comprehension of the laws of destruction, Kea said tiredly. With that, she immediately sat down and began to recuperate. Jianchen looked at the pale-faced Kea with mixed feelings. He sighed gently before focusing his attention on the imprint Kea had left behind. He sent his mind into the imprint to comprehend the mysteries of the laws within. Jianchen became completely immersed in it very soon. His talent had always been extraordinary, so with the assistance of the imprint, his comprehension of the laws of destruction increased extremely quickly. It basically improved at all times. Mid-deity, late deity, early deity, mid-deity. At this moment, Jianchen's comprehension of the laws of destruction skyrocketed. It progressed so quickly that it was simply astounding. Master's perception is so strong that it's even more powerful than I thought, of course. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for Master to comprehend the way of the sword so early on the Tianyuan continent. Although he used the comprehension tea tree back then, Master's cultivation was just too low back then. He was nowhere near the minimum requirement to comprehend the way of the sword. In my opinion, no matter how great Master's comprehension abilities and talent were back then, it would have been impossible for him to comprehend the way of the sword with the comprehension tea tree. Yet Master did it. The sword spirits secretly sighed in amazement as well. Even though they knew that it was all because of the imprint, it also indirectly proved Jianchen's talent. At the same time, over 1,000 divine kings gathered on the 12th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. They sat around the 3 huge statues quietly. All of them had their eyes closed as they sat there, using their minds to comprehend the three statues. The divine kings of the Yun family gathered in an inconspicuous corner of the crowd as well. However, their numbers had decreased once again compared to a few years ago. There were only 5 of them left. Xian, your fortune is great. You obtained a spiritual root of heavenly ways as soon as you entered the Azure Poseidon Palace. Reaching Chaotic Prime won't be a problem for you. You have to grasp this opportunity right now and properly comprehend it. See if you can obtain the recognition of one of the statues. The legacy of one of the 4 statues has already been taken away. As long as you obtain the recognition of any one of the remaining 3, not only will you be able to break free from the Sky Empire, but you'll even have the chance to avenge Jianqin, Yun Lianqing said to Yun Lianqing. Yun Lianqing said to Yun Xian, who sat beside him secretly. Even though he knew that obtaining the legacy here was just a fantasy, he still held some hope. Yun Xian opened her eyes. She glanced at the 5th prince, Mr. Shu, and the others nearby, and nodded slightly. The 5th prince of the Sky Empire was communicating with Mr. Shu via voice transmission as well. Mr. Shu, let's stay here for the next period of time. We'll leave with the group when the Azure Poseidon Palace closes. There are a few extremely powerful divine kings on the 12th floor. Even if Ming Dong comes here, he won't be able to gain anything. You're worrying too much, 5th prince. Ming Dong probably doesn't know that I've moved against Jianqin. After all, it's rumored that only the 8 divine kings took part in the encirclement against Jianqin. I wasn't included. Looks like I'm not a divine king, so I've been overlooked by many people. Mr. Shu said secretly. So what if Ming Dong knows about this? Don't forget that we found a life star core in the Azure Poseidon Palace. Every single life star core comes from the core of a planet filled with life. It's extremely rare, and it contains extremely terrifying life energy. It's a treasure that cultivators who cultivate the way of life can only come across by chance. The 5th prince said confidently. 5th prince, you want to. Mr. Shu was surprised as he glanced into the distance. At the place where Mr. Shu was looking, there was an empty space where no one dared to step into. Only 2 women with extraordinary temperaments were sitting cross-legged inside. It was as if this vast open space had become the exclusive territory of these 2 women. One of the 2 women wore a violet dress, and her face was covered by a veil. A simple zither was placed across her knees. She did not try to comprehend the statue like everyone else in an attempt to obtain the recognition of the Grand Prime's legacy. Instead, she focused all of her attention on the zither. The other woman was wearing a long green dress. Her appearance was enough to cause the downfall of countries and cities. She was indescribably beautiful. Mr. Shu didn't look at the veiled woman in a violet dress, and his gaze had converged onto the woman in a green dress instead. His face carried a wisp of terror and deep fear that was impossible to conceal. Although the green-clothed woman had concealed all of her presence, making her seem like nothing special, her strength was deeply engraved in the minds of all the god kings on the floor. This was because when the woman in green had first arrived on this floor, she had clashed with a woman in silver-white armor. Although it was only a single clash, the destructive might made all the divine kings wonder whether a battle between primordial realm experts had taken place. To no surprise, the law that the woman in green comprehended was the laws of life. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 2180. It was also because of that clash that all the god kings on the 12th floor clearly understood the strength of the 2 women. They understood just how shocking they were. As a matter of fact, without any exaggeration, all the other divine kings gathered on the 12th floor of Poseidon Palace behaved themselves with the 2 of them present. They no longer dared to make their own rules. That's right. If we really have to, we'll offer up the Life Star Core. Although the Life Star Core is precious, it's only unimaginable to experts who practice the laws of life. There just happens to be an expert like that here. I think it shouldn't be difficult for us to use a life star core as a reward to get this expert to stop Ming Dong for us. Although Ming Dong has a great background and has killed several divine kings consecutively without fear of the organizations behind them seeking revenge, we're only asking the Supreme Divine King who has grasped the laws of life to help us stop Ming Dong. It's not like we're actually asking her to fight Ming Dong to the death. I think she'll agree. The fifth prince said to Mr. Shu, secretly as if he was extremely confident. Mr. Shu also felt that the fifth prince was very reasonable. He immediately relaxed and said, "If that's the case, we don't have to worry about whether Ming Dong will find out about us or not. Ming Dong is so powerful that it's indeed very difficult for us to fend him off in the Azure Poseidon Palace. However, once he leaves the Azure Poseidon Palace, the primordial realm experts of my Sky Empire will receive him. It'll be a piece of cake for him to leave if he wants to. I'm just very curious about the identities of the woman in the green dress and the woman in white armor in the distance. Who are they in the top 10 of the Divine King's throne? They're actually so terrifying. However, there's so many people here, yet no one seems to be able to recognize the two of them. Otherwise, we only need to know their names, and we'll be able to determine their rankings immediately." Mr. Shu's gaze swept across the crowd, occasionally glancing at the two peerlessly beautiful women. While his heart was filled with fear, it was also filled with curiosity. In reality, they were not the only ones who were curious about the two women. Basically, all the divine kings in the entire Azure Poseidon Palace paid close attention to the two of them. Obviously, the battle between the two of them had left an indelible impression in everyone's hearts. Among the two peerless women who were the center of attention, one of them was Adriana. At this moment, Aladona had concealed all of her presence. She sat beside Shangguan like an ordinary person, ignoring the gazes of the people in the surroundings. Occasionally, when her gaze swept past the dense crowd and saw a graceful figure in silver-white battle armor sitting cross-legged on the ground by herself in the distance, her calm gaze clearly contained an unconcealable fury and hatred. "Shui, Yin, Lan." Aladona's face sank as she gritted her teeth and muttered those 3 words inside. Even with her magnanimous heart, when facing the woman in white armor, it was still difficult for her to maintain her calm and indifferent attitude. There was a very, very deep hatred. This was because the woman was her former enemy, one of the 4 protectors of the Ice Goddess Hall, Shui Yunlan. At this moment, Shangguan looked around and looked at Aladona beside her. She asked, "Sister, is your grievance with her really that deep?" Aladona sucked in a deep breath and said slowly, "Sister Mu, you don't understand Shui Yunlan. You don't know just how many things Shui Yunlan committed that infuriated people back on the Tianyuan continent. Not only did she seal up an entire world and prevent anyone from entering the Saints' world, but she even personally carried out a great slaughter, wiping out an entire era in that world." Adriana looked at Shangguan and continued, "Do you know why the histories of the Tianyuan continent, the Beast God continent, the Sea Realm, and the Wasteland continent are only around 1,000,000 years old at the longest? As for the earlier period of history, it was completely blank. There were no records at all. That's because Shui Yunlan's blood-soaked hands erased all the records of the earlier eras. Countless sainthood and origin realm cultivators have died to her hands, including people from our god clan. It's just that what makes me feel helpless is that Shui Yunlan is just too powerful. I can't stop her, and she possesses a treasure bestowed upon her by the Ice Goddess, one of the 7 grand exalts. Even the laws of the lower world are unable to do anything to her. As soon as she mentioned the past, Aladona felt uncontrollable anger. Her hatred for Shui Yunlan was extremely deep, so her gaze towards Shui Yunlan became sharper and sharper. "Aladona, there's no need to look at me like that. You may have settled down for over 3 million years in the lower world, making you far more powerful than before, making you one of the top 10 figures of the Divine King, but you're still not my opponent. Perhaps because she sensed Aladona's sharper gaze, Shui Yunlan's cold, emotionless voice rang out from afar. She spoke to Aladona secretly, so aside from Aladona, even Shangwan Mu could not hear anything. Aladona, I have no intentions of fighting with you. I hope you can control yourself. You should know the difference between you and me right now. I can let bygones be bygones, but if it happens again, I'll make you pay the price. Shui Yunlan's icy voice rang out clearly. Her voice was filled with disdain towards Aladona. She did not take her seriously at all. Shui Yunlan, you sure are confident. I really do want to see if your current strength is really as tough as you sound, where you can look down on me like that. Aladona refused to back down and replied with a sneer. When she first entered the 12th floor of the Poseidon Palace, the reason why she did not continue fighting with Shui Yunlan was not because she feared Shui Yunlan. Instead, it was because she knew that once she engaged in an intense battle with Shui Yunlan, the terrifying shockwaves of energy would harm many innocent people. Even Shangwan Mu would probably be unable to avoid it. As a result, she was forced to stop fighting with Shui Yunlan out of consideration for Shangwan Mu. As for Shui Yunlan, she clearly had no interest in clashing with Adriana either, so they both stopped after clashing once. I'm just very curious. With Shui Yunlan's level of cultivation, you can reach the primordial realm at any time. So why haven't you broken through yet, remaining as a divine king? Moreover, you've appeared on the 12th floor of the Poseidon Palace. What makes me even more confused is that you actually want to obtain the Grand Prime's legacy here. Adriana looked at Shui Yunlan mysteriously as her lips curled into a strange smile. She continued, the organization behind you is the Ice Goddess Hall, a place that possesses one of the 7 grand exalts of the Saints' world, the Supreme Ice Goddess. Do you really think the legacy of the Taoist sect of Neptunia is enough for you? Moreover, according to my knowledge, the cultivation methods of your Ice Goddess Hall are all related to ice without any exception. Since when have the people of your Ice Goddess Hall taken an interest in cultivation methods that have nothing to do with ice? P.S. Please listen to Xiaoyao's message. Once there are any updates or changes, Xiaoyao will inform you through the message. Search. Xingxingxiao 110. It was not complicated. It was Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a police number. Chapter 2181. Don't tell me that you, Shui Yunlan, want the wealth left behind by the Grand Prime? But that doesn't make sense. With the strength of your Ice Goddess Hall, even if you lack resources, all you need to do is send out a simple message, and countless large organizations across the Saints' world will offer up large amounts of wealth. Why would you care about the measly legacy left behind by the Grand Prime of the Taoist sect of Neptunia? When she reached there, a strange smile suddenly appeared on Aladona's face. Have you and the Snow Goddess not returned to the Ice Goddess Hall yet, Shui Yunlan? If that's the case, do you want me to send a message to the Ice Goddess Hall so that the people of the Ice Goddess Hall can receive you and the Snow Goddess? Aladona, don't you dare! Shui Yunlan's reaction was extremely intense when she heard Aladona's last sentence. She suddenly turned her head, and her eyes became silver white. They shone like swords as she stared at Aladona, firmly. She said secretly, Aladona, if you really do that, it won't be as simple as just the grievances between us. Although the Great Majesty is heavily injured, she's still alive, while the war god of your god clan still hasn't matured. I hope you don't bring disaster to your god clan. The ice goddess of your Ice Goddess Hall has been recovering for millions of years, but there's still no news about her. She hasn't even appeared for something as important as the return of the Snow Goddess. Who knows if she's still alive? On the other hand, although the great war god of my god clan still hasn't truly matured, that day won't be too far away. Moreover, with the current strength of our god clan, even without the war god, we can still awe the world and stand among the peak organizations. Then let's look at your Ice Goddess Hall. Apart from the 2 ice goddesses, who else can stand out? Who else has the ability to threaten my god race and bring disaster to my god race? Adriana said with a mocking expression. Shui Yunlan's face hidden behind the mask had already sunk. She knew that Aladona was telling the truth. The Ice Goddess Hall never had many people. They did not recruit as many disciples as other large sections. They did not have so many disciples, nor did they have 8 majesties like the heavenly palace of Bishing. Even without the Enita Grand Prime, one of the 7 Grand Exalts, the heavenly palace of Bishing still stood. As for the Ice Goddess Hall, apart from the Ice Goddess and the Snow Goddess, there was indeed no one else who could hold up the fort. Among the 2 of them, the Ice Goddess was heavily injured, and her condition was still unknown. Even the return of the Snow Goddess was an important matter, but the Ice Goddess did not appear. It was obvious that the situation was not optimistic. As for the Snow Goddess, she had yet to awaken her memories. She could not remember anything from her past life. Without the tremendous resources of the Ice Goddess Hall, it would take her an indefinite amount of time to recover to her peak condition. Aladona rejoiced inside when she saw Shui Yunlan's gaze become even more sunken. She said secretly, Shui Yunlan, don't act like you're dead. I may hate you, but I'm not someone who doesn't care about the bigger picture, nor am I a despicable person. Even if I have grievances with you, I will cultivate diligently and defeat you in an open battle. I won't use some underhanded methods against you and the Snow Goddess. I won't leak the news of you and the Snow Goddess either. In the future, you need to put away your condescending attitude before me, because in my eyes, you're just a person who's in dire straits right now. There's really nothing for you to be proud of. As for the matter of the Tianyuan continent, I will fight you sooner or later. Shui Yunlan's eyes narrowed. She glanced at Adriana deeply before shifting her gaze. She lowered her head slightly and stared at the ground blankly. She said nothing. Aladona's description of her as a person who's in dire straits was like a curse that lingered in her head for a very long time. It caused her mind to shake violently, and at the same time she felt sorrowful. Shangguan Mu had no idea that Aladona and Shui Yunlan had already engaged in a battle of words in such a short amount of time. She looked at the zither of the demonic cry again as joy and eagerness filled her eyes. The ancestor was right. The 12th floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace can indeed awaken the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry prematurely, because there's a mysterious power on this floor. The zither of the demonic cry is absorbing this power automatically. It's just that this power is extremely special. No one can sense it. If it weren't for the fact that I've gained the initial recognition of the zither of the demonic cry, even I wouldn't have been able to sense this mysterious power. Shangguan Mu thought. She did not covet the 3 Grand Prime's legacies. Instead, she placed all her attention on the zither of the demonic cry, hoping that the artifact spirit would awaken sooner. Jianqin continued to sit in the air in the world of volcanoes on the 8th floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. He silently recovered from the aftereffects of using destiny as he silently waited for Jianqin. The 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing had spread out, protecting Mingdong in a 5-pointed star. They remained vigilant against the surroundings at all times as they carried out their duties loyally. Even further away, many supreme divine kings gathered in groups of 3 to 5 in the sky, observing the lava below at all times. However, their numbers had decreased drastically compared to a few years ago. Many of the divine kings had already left, seeking their own fortuitous encounters in the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Over 80% of the people who still persisted were from the group that had entered later. These people all ranked towards the top of the divine kings' rankings, or they had already made it into the top 100. They were not doing it for the legacy. Instead, they were doing it for the Tsang Poseidon Palace. The lava has already been rampaging for so long. When will it settle down? Something must have happened at the bottom of the lava, or it wouldn't be so abnormal. Obviously, everyone knows that something must have happened down there, but who dares to go down there? The supreme divine kings all hovered in the sky. Every single one of their faces were filled with worry. The day of the Tsang Poseidon Palace's closure drew closer and closer, but the girl was still nowhere to be found. This made them extremely frustrated. Time passed silently. In the blink of an eye, another half a year had passed. Now, ignoring the time Jianqin spent collecting fire divine crystals, he had spent over 4 years in seclusion in the Anata Tower. Only half of the time remained until the Tsang Poseidon Palace closed. On this day, Jianqin suddenly opened his eyes as he comprehended the laws of destruction on the first floor of the Anata Tower. The moment he opened his eyes, a pure presence of destruction seemed to permeate the surroundings, shining with black light. At that moment, his gaze was extraordinarily terrifying. It seemed like he could destroy everything he saw with just his eyes, reducing everything to dust and nothingness. However, his gaze only lasted for a split second before calming down and becoming ordinary again. With Kaya's imprint, comprehending the laws of destruction really is extremely easy. In just a short amount of time, my comprehension of the laws of destruction has reached late over God. However, it's also because I comprehended too quickly that the energy in Kaya's imprint was depleted extremely quickly. It's almost completely gone now. I probably won't be able to break through to the Divine King level in a short amount of time. Jianqin sighed emotionally as he stared at the dim imprint before him. Imprints of ways did not exist forever. Every single imprint was supported by energy. If one did not comprehend it, the energy would be depleted extremely slowly. But if one comprehended it at an astonishing rate, the energy would be depleted at an extraordinary rate as well. Chapter 2182. Jianqin, your comprehension of the laws of destruction has already reached late over God. Your understanding of the laws of destruction is incomparable to the past. I'll demonstrate to you how I use the laws of destruction, as well as how I use the laws, Kaya said to Jianqin. She felt happy for Jianqin that Jianqin's comprehension of the laws of destruction had reached late over God in such a short amount of time. Kaya, you've used up too much energy from the imprint. You haven't recovered completely yet, so you don't need to continue demonstrating because your method is very difficult for me to grasp, Jianqin said. Jianqin comforted her. He was thinking for Kaya's sake. He did not wish for her to exhaust herself too much for him. Although it was just condensing the laws of destruction, which basically exhausted Kaya, Jianqin still hoped that Kaya could recover to her peak condition sooner. You were unable to grasp it back then because you hadn't comprehended the laws of destruction. However, your comprehension of the laws of destruction has reached late over God now. You're only a step away from the Divine King, so it's very different from before. Don't forget that there's still a great battle after we get out. Since you have an opportunity to increase your strength now, you can't waste it, Kaya said. Before Jianqin could agree, she immediately began demonstrating. Clearly, she really hoped that Jianqin could grasp the method and technique. Jianqin was helpless. He could not let Kaya down, so all he could do was sit down before Kaya and focus on comprehending Kaya's usage of the laws of destruction. He would close his eyes from time to time and relax his mind to comprehend it carefully. Before he had comprehended the laws of destruction, Jianqin only knew that Kaya's usage and control of the laws of destruction was extremely great. He had reached the level of purity long ago, reaching the peak of perfection. However, now that he had comprehended the laws of destruction, he gained a different understanding when he saw how Kaya used the laws of destruction. To his surprise, he discovered that Kaya's comprehension of the laws of destruction was even more terrifying than he had imagined it to be. It was not an ability that a divine king should have grasped, which shocked him greatly. In particular, the inscriptions condensed from the laws of destruction by Kaya were extremely profound. They contained endless mysteries of laws, which made Jianqin feel like he was watching a law evolve. It was so complicated that it exceeded his understanding. Jianqin, have you gained anything? A year later, Kaya stopped in exhaustion. He looked at Jianqin eagerly. Jianqin shook his head. He was dejected. The method you've grasped is just too profound. I'm nowhere close to being able to comprehend it right now. Too profound? Really? Kea was rather stunned. She knew exactly how great Jianqin's talent was. Yet even Jianqin said that it was too profound. Was the usage of the laws of destruction really that difficult? If it was so difficult, why was it so effortless for her to grasp it? Jianqin looked at Kea with some mixed feelings. He knew that Kea was probably the reincarnation of some great expert and was slowly recovering the abilities of her past life. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for her strength to soar so rapidly after waking up from her slumber. Her usage of the laws of destruction was far greater than any other expert of the same level. Even Jianqin himself paled in comparison. However, even though Kaya's abilities were slowly recovering right now, her memories clearly showed no signs of awakening. She still only remembered what she had experienced in this life. There's not much time left in the Poseidon Palace. The lizard outside still hasn't left, so we can't harvest the fire divine crystals. Kea, you should properly recover first. I think we'll be leaving soon. I'll go check on Ziyun and Xiaoman first. There are some things I need to understand. Jianqin glanced at Kea deeply before silently vanishing. He used the power of the Anata Tower to teleport over. When Jianqin arrived beside Ziyun and Xiaoman, the two sisters were not cultivating. Ziyun was explaining cultivation to Xiaoman seriously. The two of them immediately stood up when they saw Jianqin arrive. Their faces were filled with gratitude. Jianqin nodded at the two of them with a smile. He looked at Xiaoman. Not only had Xiaoman grown up in the past few years, no longer being the little girl he had seen on the spatial battleship, she had reached the level of the Holy Emperor and was about to break through to the Origin realm very soon. Jianqin was not even a Heaven Saint Master when he was Xiaoman's age. Of course, it was impossible for him to enjoy the same treatment as Xiaoman back then. He lived in a lower world that lacked cultivation resources. He lived in a saint's world that was rich in resources and had the personal guidance of the Divine King as well as a large amount of resources. How could the two of them be compared? Miss Ziyun, there are some things I want to talk to you about alone, said Jianqin. Afterwards, he left with Ziyun alone, leaving only Xiaoman behind. Brother Jianqin is meeting Sister Ziyun alone. Has he fallen in love with Sister Ziyun? Xiaoman thought inside as she watched Jianqin and Ziyun leave. She became excited. Yeah, that must be it. Otherwise, why would Brother Jianqin help us time and time again? He must have fallen in love with Sister Ziyun. Moreover, Sister Ziyun is so pretty, so it's very normal for Brother Jianqin to fall in love with Sister Ziyun. Miss Ziyun, I want to know about Xiaoman's background. Of course, please don't worry. I don't have the slightest bit of ill intent in investigating this matter. You should know that what happened to Lil Man has already attracted the attention of many people. I must know the root of the matter and understand the cause of the matter in detail so that I can make a better plan. Xiaoman was just too young, so her understanding of her parents was nowhere near as deep as Ziyun's. As a result, he needed to start with Ziyun. I'll tell you everything I know. Afterwards, Ziyun told him everything she knew. Jianqin also gained a rough understanding of Xiaoman's parents from Ziyun. He knew that Xiaoman's parents were an extremely old man and his wife. They had lost all of their cultivation, and after passing on everything they knew to Ziyun, they passed away 1,000 years later. Before they died, they left behind a few extraordinary life-saving treasures and a Neptunian medallion. They ordered Ziyun to take Xiaoman into the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, no matter what. Jianqin sank into his thoughts after hearing about Xiaoman's parents. Now he was certain that Xiaoman's parents were connected to the Taoist sect of Neptunian. Otherwise, they would not have ordered Ziyun to take Xiaoman into the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, no matter what. This was because they already knew that Xiao Man would be protected by the world in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. As long as she did not leave the Neptunian Palace, no one would be able to harm her. Even if Xiao Man's parents were disciples of the Taoist sect of Neptunian in the past, it's not enough for their descendants to receive the protection of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. This is because not just anyone can receive such treatment unless they're a direct descendant of the master of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. If Xiao Man's parents really are a direct descendant of the master of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, the master of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace would definitely think of a way to protect his descendants and send them out. He would sever the connection with them as well. That would explain why they were able to avoid the destruction of their sect. After all, the power of samsara, of the samsaric immortal exalt, can be connected through any bloodline or karma. If he really wanted to destroy a sect, no one in the sect would be able to survive. However, although the master of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace severed the connection, he still failed to protect them. Xiao Man's parents have completely lost their cultivation. They should have been contaminated by the power of samsara that was transmitted through their bloodline. Under the influence of the power of samsara, they were slowly reduced to mortals, Genshin analyzed silently. The mystery of Xiao Man's origins gradually became clear. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Genshin's head. In that moment, he understood all the secrets. The Neptunian moon, the Neptunian moon. I finally know. The Neptunian moon has never appeared since the destruction of the Taoist sect of Neptunian. Only with Xiao Man's arrival did the Neptunian Poseidon Palace split into yin and yang again. The Neptunian moon hung high in the sky. The appearance of the Neptunian moon clearly indicates the awakening of the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, allowing the world in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace to operate normally. The sun rose and set, and the moon shone brightly. It became a real world. The artifact spirit was awakened by Xiao Man's bloodline. Clearly, the thing that secretly protects Xiao Man is the laws of the world created by the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. It's just that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace probably only awakened for a split second before falling into a deep slumber again. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for there to be no further disturbances. Genshin sucked in a deep breath. After understanding everything, he struggled to calm down. His emotions fluctuated violently. Now that he had reached this point, he obviously knew that the Neptunian Poseidon Palace and everything within it actually belonged to Xiao Man. Chapter 2183. Ziyun's gaze remained on Genshin's face the entire time. When she saw Genshin's expression change drastically, she immediately thought of something and asked, "Genshin, do you know something about Xiao Man? If you do, may I ask if you can tell me a little? I watched Xiao Man grow up after all. I don't want anything to happen to her. If I've guessed correctly, Xiao Man's ancestor should be the master of the Poseidon Palace. It's also because of Xiao Man's special bloodline that she was able to receive the protection of the palace," Genshin said. He did not hide this from Ziyun. "What? How is that possible?" Ziyun was stunned. Disbelief filled her face. "Of course. That's just my personal guess. It's also possible that I've guessed wrongly, and the truth of the matter might not be what I imagine it to be," said Genshin. Although that was what he said, he was already 70% certain about his guess. Genshin and Ziyun's conversation ended very soon. After separating from Ziyun, he stood at the entrance of the Anita Tower all by himself. He stared at the lava outside through the damaged door and sank into his thoughts. The fact that Xiao Man was the descendant of the master of the Poseidon Palace had indeed taken him by surprise. He had no idea how he should treat Xiao Man next. Should he just leave Xiao Man in the Poseidon Palace and not care about her? Or should he assist Xiao Man and help her complete the process of accepting the master of the Poseidon Palace? But speaking of which, he'd only met Xiao Man and Ziyun by chance, and they didn't have a deep relationship with each other. He had only helped Xiao Man back on the spatial battleship because he missed Xiao Ling. He saw Xiao Ling's figure on Xiao Man, which was why he helped her. But now Xiao Man had grown up. She had become a slender woman, no longer resembling Xiao Ling naturally. Jianqin could not see any resemblance of Xiao Ling in her. As a result, Jianqin believed that even if he left Xiao Man and Ziyun in the Poseidon Palace and left them to fend for themselves, he would have a clear conscience. He would not have let anyone down. This was because he did not owe Xiao Man and Ziyun anything. On the contrary, he had assisted them twice. Even if he owed someone, it would be Xiao Man and Ziyun who owed him. However, if he continued to help them and assisted Xiao Man in obtaining the master of the Poseidon Palace, then Jianqin knew exactly how difficult and bumpy the road ahead would be. If they were close friends that he had a close relationship with, then he would not hesitate even if he had to go through a mountain of blades or an ocean of flames. However, he had only met Ziyun and Xiao Man by chance. They did not have a close relationship, and they could not even be considered as the most basic of friends. Was it worth taking this risk for them? For a moment, Jianqin was slightly hesitant. He did not know how to deal with the matter of Xiao Man. Jianqin, please help us. At this moment, Ziyun and Xiao Man arrived before Jianqin and knelt together. What are you doing? This scene caused Jianqin to frown. With a wave of his hand, he used a gentle force to lift Xiao Man and Ziyun up. Jianqin, I know that it's very difficult for me to help Xiao Man obtain the Poseidon Palace and take back the ancestors' legacy with my strength. This is because the Supreme Divine King outside will definitely interfere. Even if Xiao Man is protected by the Poseidon Palace, she might not be truly safe. Perhaps there are people who possess ancient secret techniques that can ignore the protective powers of the Poseidon Palace and injure Xiao Man. However, I have no way of resisting them at all. As a result, Ziyun begs Jianqin to help Xiao Man. Ziyun looked at Jianqin with a pleading gaze. Ziyun gritted her teeth when she saw how Jianqin remained silent. As if she had made up her mind, she made up her mind and said, Jianqin, if you can help Xiao Man obtain the Poseidon Palace, Ziyun will be yours from today onwards. With that, Ziyun blushed slightly, but she stared at Jianqin closely as if she wanted to see what he was thinking from Jianqin's face. To Ziyun's disappointment, she could only see surprise on Jianqin's face. It was as if her offer of marriage did not move Jianqin at all. It had to be mentioned that Ziyun's appearance was quite extraordinary. It was enough to make the birds alight and the beasts alight. Although she was not as beautiful as Shangguanmu, she was still stunning. Unfortunately, Jianqin was not a person who lusted after beauty, so her seduction was naturally useless. Brother Jianqin, if you help me obtain the Poseidon Palace successfully, I'll give you all the legacies and heavenly resources in there. I just need to take back the Poseidon Palace and take back the things that belong to my ancestor. I can't let it end up in the hands of outsiders. At this moment, Xiao Man raised her head and said bravely. Determination filled her face. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. All the legacies and heavenly resources in the Poseidon Palace was an unimaginable amount of resources. It was indeed fatally tempting to him. Let's ignore the heavenly resources for now. Just the legacies of the primordial realm here are enough for the Tianyuan family to develop rapidly. The light in Jianqin's eyes flickered as he thought quickly. After a while of thought, he said, All right, Xiao Man, remember what you said. If I help you take back the things that your ancestor left behind, all the heavenly resources and legacies in the Poseidon Palace will belong to me. Xiao Man's conditions were enough for Jianqin to take a risk. Although the Poseidon Palace had tempted Jianqin before, he understood that it was just a hot potato to him. Moreover, the descendant of the master of the Poseidon Palace was here. How could anyone else get their hands on it? Xiao Man immediately became overjoyed when she saw Jianqin agree. She said, All right. However, Brother Jianqin, the legacies at the top should have been left behind by my ancestor, so I can't give you the 3 legacies there. The rest will go to Brother Jianqin. All right, it's settled then. Jianqin agreed without any hesitation. He was not interested in the legacies of grand primes because they were useless to him. As long as he could obtain the legacies of chaotic primes and infinite primes, it would be enough for the Tianyuan family. In an extremely remote and inconspicuous corner on the 8th floor of the Poseidon Palace, a head covered in boiling lava slowly emerged from the lava silently. As the head was covered in lava and only a single head had emerged, it seemed extremely well hidden in the vast sea of lava. It seemed to have fused with the lava, making it very difficult to discover its existence. At this moment, the head's eyes suddenly snapped open. What kind of eyes were they? They flickered with cold light, and they were as sharp as swords. No one dared to look at them directly. This pair of eyes that were as sharp as swords first observed its surroundings with vigilance. After confirming that there was no one around, this head that seemed to have fused with the lava began to slowly grow taller. All of this was carried out silently, without the slightest movement. Even the thick lava did not produce the slightest ripple. It really looked like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, a slender person stood on the lava silently. At a closer glance, this person did not possess any protective items. Instead, he completely used his tough body to resist the terrifying heat of the lava. The terrifying lava that could cause the expressions of countless supreme god kings to change, and even primordial realm experts to avoid, seemed to pose no threat to him at all. Fortunately, there was no one in the surroundings, or it would definitely cause a great disturbance in the Poseidon Palace. To no surprise, the person who emerged from the lava was Jianshan. Jianshan waved his hand, and a fist-sized, damaged tower suddenly flew out from the lava and landed in his hand. He glanced at the depths of the lava in fear and let out a sigh of relief inside. He thought, fortunately, the lizard didn't follow me. It looks like it won't leave the bottom of the lava so easily. It's exactly because of that no one has discovered its existence. Chapter 2184. As I expected, there really are many god kings gathered on the 8th floor. Although they've concealed their presences, I can vaguely sense that they're powerful. There are probably quite a few supreme god kings among them, Jianshan said with a sigh. Jianshan stood at the foot of a mountain in the distance. He hid behind a huge boulder as he gazed into the distance sternly. In order to conceal himself, he did not release the senses of his soul. He only observed with his eyes. The large group of divine kings sitting in the air in the distance did not notice Jianshan's existence at all. Putting aside the fact that Jianshan was very far away from them, they would never have thought that someone could stand at the foot of a volcano. This was because every inch of these volcanoes was terrifyingly hot. Even a supreme divine king would find it difficult to resist. Jianshan did not dare to stay for long. He left very soon. Under the cover of the numerous volcanoes, he silently left the 8th floor. No one noticed his tracks, including Mingdong. On the 9th floor of Poseidon Palace, a bare-chested, burly man wearing only a pair of shorts flew through the air casually. He seemed to be hurrying along aimlessly as he looked around with great interest, admiring the scenery along the way. "Fellow, I've been in seclusion for several years in the palace of Poseidon Palace, and I've only just emerged. May I ask if anything interesting has happened in the palace of Poseidon Palace in the past few years?" At this moment, the burly man who only wore a pair of shorts stopped an early god king. He tossed out a small pile of supreme, great divine crystals before asking with his arms crossed. The early divine king who had been stopped originally seemed rather displeased. But when he saw the pile of supreme grade divine crystals thrown out by the burly man, his expression immediately eased up. He clasped his fist politely and told the burly man everything he knew. He told the burly man in great detail. Whether it was Jianshan's death from the encirclement of 8 divine kings because of Xiaoman, or how a divine king called Mingdong killed his way into the palace of Poseidon, he told the burly man everything. I never thought that in just a few years, so many shocking events would have happened in the palace of Poseidon Palace. Thank you for telling me. After learning everything, the bare-chested, burly man directly left. However, he did not go very far. Instead, he slowly came to a stop after distancing himself from the early Divine King. He turned around and looked in the direction of the 8th floor. Unconcealable excitement and joy filled his face. I never thought that Ming Dong would have come to the palace of Poseidon Palace as well. Moreover, he's already become one of the Divine Kings. Ha 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 ha! No wonder I picked up the head of a Divine King from the bottom of the lava, and he just happened to be the person who tried to kill me in the past. Back then, I had thought that he had encountered an extremely powerful enemy, so he was beheaded and died without a complete corpse. Only now do I know that the two of them were killed by Ming Dong. Ming Dong has already killed 4 of the 8 Divine Kings who tried to kill me. Moreover, he chased Song Ying all the way to the 8th floor. Ha ha ha! I never thought that Ming Dong would become so powerful. He's already surpassed me. Looks like I have to work harder as well. The man laughed from the bottom of his heart. He seemed to be in an extremely good mood. The man was Jianqin in disguise. Not only had he changed his appearance, but he had even changed his body shape through his control over the chaotic body. Although Ming Dong is in the palace of Poseidon Palace, it's still not suitable for me to meet him, just in case I cause trouble for him. Even if he's not weak now, he won't be able to deal with the danger. Jianqin calmed down very soon. After a moment of thought, he shot off with lightning speed, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Before long, Jianqin stopped in an extremely remote place. With a thought, the Anata Tower immediately flew out, landing gently on the ground under Jianqin's control. Xiao Man emerged from the tower nervously and eagerly. However, to Jianqin's surprise, when Xiao Man appeared in the palace of Poseidon, the protective power from the Poseidon Palace did not appear again. In other words, Xiao Man was no longer under the protection of the palace of Poseidon. Did the Anata Tower sever the connection between Xiao Man and the palace of Poseidon because I sucked Xiao Man into the Anata Tower? Xiao Man and the palace of Poseidon seem to be connected through a thread. Now that the thread has been severed, the connection has been severed as well. So Xiao Man can't receive the protection of the power anymore? The light in Jianqin's eyes flickered as he sank into his thoughts. Brother Jianqin, why don't I see that protective energy? Xiao Man was confused as well. She was at a loss. Xiao Man, try dripping a droplet of blood on your pendant, said Jianqin. He had already understood that Xiao Man had used the presence of her bloodline to awaken the artifact spirit a few years ago, so he wanted her to try again. If the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace awakened again, it would be much easier for Xiao Man to retrieve her ancestors' legacy. Xiao Man immediately did as she was told. She cut her finger and dripped a droplet of blood onto the pendant on her chest. During this time, Jianqin stared at the surroundings cautiously. As he waited for the artifact spirit to awaken, his gaze became extremely piercing. No one doubted that he would kill anyone who trespassed with lightning speed. This was because Xiao Man's information could not be leaked right now. It was just a pity that he was unable to change Xiao Man's appearance, because Xiao Man's cultivation was just too low. No matter how she hid herself, the Divine King could see through her with a single glance. Brother Jianqin, there doesn't seem to be any disturbances, Xiao Man asked blankly after a few minutes. Jianqin frowned slightly and said after some thought, the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace should still be in a deep slumber. The reason why it hasn't been awakened this time is probably because it has consumed too much of its energy after waking up last time, which has reduced its ability to sense your bloodline. Xiao Man panicked when she heard that the artifact spirit could not be awakened. She was completely out of ideas. Brother Jianqin, what should we do then? Don't worry. No one knows where the artifact spirit of the Poseidon Palace is. However, according to my understanding of the artifact spirit, even if the artifact spirit is in a deep slumber, it will choose a few extremely important places. The 12th floor of the Poseidon Palace is where the master of the Poseidon Palace died, and his legacy is left behind. If I've guessed correctly, the artifact spirit should be sleeping somewhere on the 12th floor that no one knows about. Chapter 2185. Now, Xiaoman completely followed Jianqin's orders. She basically did whatever Jianqin said without any objections. Afterwards, Jianqin let Xiaoman return to the Anata Tower again. He took Xiaoman's jade pendant and a bottle of Xiaoman's blood as he made his way to the 12th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace alone. The entrance to the 12th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace was no longer a secret. Jianqin had learnt about it long ago. As a result, he arrived on the 12th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace very soon without being disturbed by anything else. As soon as he set foot on the 12th floor, Jianqin saw the 4 towering statues in the distance with a single glance. He was immediately shocked. Aside from one of the statues that was dim, the other 3 were surrounded by a hazy light. Vaguely, the tremendous pressure that belonged to grand primes seemed to radiate from them. It seemed like it could crush the stars and rain above the sky. It possessed the bearing of a sovereign of the world. Jianqin knew that the 4 statues belonged to the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia in the past. They existed there. However, Jianqin did not approach the statues. Instead, he stood very far away. He had not come for the Grand Prime's legacy. Instead, he came to awaken the slumbering artifact spirit. Moreover, there were quite a few divine king gathered around the 3 statues. Jianqin did not want to raise their attention and expose his identity, so not only did he conceal his presence after coming here, but he did not even use the senses of his soul. Suddenly, Jianqin's eyes narrowed. He discovered a few familiar figures in the crowd in the distance. Immediately, he retreated far away without leaving any traces behind. At the same time, he looked away, not daring to pay too much attention to them. The 5th Prince of the Sky Empire and Mr. Shu. I never thought they'd be here as well. Although I've changed my appearance and body shape, it's still not perfect. They might be able to recognize me from a few traces. It looks like I need to leave this place. Jianqin thought rapidly. Like a ghost, he used the terrain and the forest to cover him as he left silently. A while later, Jianqin appeared several 100,000 kilometers away. He took out Xiaoman's jade pendant and the bottle of her blood in an extremely well-hidden place. He dripped a few droplets of blood onto the jade pendant without any hesitation. As soon as the blood came in contact with the jade pendant, it was silently absorbed by the jade pendant. Afterwards, strands of a mysterious presence that even Jianqin could not sense drifted out from the jade pendant. Permeating the surroundings, wanted to leave this place. Strand. After doing all that, Jianqin waited quietly. However, even after waiting for a very long time, the artifact spirit still did not awaken. At the same time, a net completely condensed from energy unfurled in an unknown space within the Tsang Poseidon Palace. It enveloped the entire space, like it had formed a cage, trapping the place. Moreover, this energy web seemed to have a life of its own. It was constantly changing and shrinking towards the center, becoming smaller and smaller. I am the master of this place. I am the one who decides everything here. In this divine palace, I have endless power. It is impossible for you to restrain me. It is even more impossible for you to assimilate me and take my place. At this moment, a wave filled with anger roared out from within the net. Within the net of energy, there was an extremely ancient will that was doing its best to resist the shrinking of the net of energy. At this moment, it was like a prisoner trapped in this large net. Moreover, whenever the net shrank slightly, a strand of energy from the ancient would be assimilated by the net, becoming a part of it. I am the artifact spirit of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. I am omnipotent here. I am the one who sets the rules. It's impossible for you to replace me. It's impossible for you to succeed. The bound ancient will struggled furiously as it roared out. It's the presence of Master's bloodline. I can sense Master's bloodline again. Its master's only bloodline, so it can't be severed. Piss off. I will never let you succeed. I will never let you succeed. The ancient will become even more frenzied. As it struggled furiously, the net swelled, but it was unable to rip it apart in the end. On the 12th floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace, Jianqin traveled 1,000,000 kilometers again. After changing locations, he dripped Xiao Man's blood onto the jade pendant again. That's strange. Why hasn't there been any reaction yet? According to what I've learned from Ziyun, when the artifact spirit of the Tsang Poseidon Palace awakened last time, it was clearly because of the presence of Xiao Man's bloodline. That can't be wrong, but why has it lost its effect now? Is it really like what I've guessed? That the artifact spirit hasn't fully recovered yet, and the last time it woke up it fell into a deep slumber? Jianqin was perplexed. Suddenly Jianqin's eyes narrowed. He abruptly turned his head and looked into the distance. His gaze seemed to pass through 1,000,000 kilometers and landed on the 4 statues. He was surprised. He could clearly sense a vast and boundless presence of the ways 1,000,000 kilometers away. It seemed to crush the sky and interfere with the laws of the world, causing them to become extremely unstable. A Grand Prime's legacy? A thought flashed through Jianqin's head. After a moment of thought, he gave up on awakening the artifact spirit for now. He flew towards the 4 statues. With Jianqin's speed, he crossed the 1,000,000 kilometers very quickly. He did not get too close. Instead, he hid several dozen kilometers away and used his great vision to observe the situation ahead. One of the 4 statues shone with dazzling light. An extremely resplendent pillar of light shot out from its forehead, enveloping a person below. The disturbance here was just too shocking. Everyone in the surroundings stood up. They all stared at the God King in a daze. Envy, mixed feelings, jealousy, astonishment, and so on appeared on their faces. Several dozen kilometers away, Jianqin saw this clearly. His face became rather ugly, as the person enveloped by the pillar of light was actually the 5th prince of the Sky Empire. The 5th prince. It's actually the 5th prince. Ha ha ha, fantastic. The 5th prince is blessed with great fortune. He's actually been recognized by a Grand Prime's legacy. The few remaining guards and Mr. Shu beside the 5th prince were all overjoyed. They were so excited that they could not contain themselves. In the surroundings, Yun Xian and the 5 remaining divine kings of the Yun family all revealed mixed feelings. The 5th prince of the Sky Empire was indeed one of the most talented individuals in the Sky Empire, but in the Neptunian Divine Palace, where supreme prodigies gathered, he was not particularly surprising. Now that he had actually obtained the recognition of a Grand Prime's legacy, they were extremely surprised. Chapter 2186. Humph! Who does this person think he is to obtain a Grand Prime's legacy? If he wants to obtain it successfully, he'll have to get through me first. Nearby, a young man with an imposing appearance snorted coldly. He shot over like a bolt of lightning, directly attacking the 5th prince, who was surrounded by the light. Mr. Shu's face changed, and he immediately flew over. He wielded the cataclysmic onyx fan to stop the young man. However, the young man was a supreme divine king who stood on the divine king's throne. He was extremely powerful. Even though Mr. Shu possessed a god artifact, he was unable to unleash the full power of the god artifact. As a result, he completely lost the upper hand. Ha 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 ha. Only one of the Grand Prime's legacies has been taken away in the past several million years. Back then, there was a storm of blood in the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Many supreme, divine kings died. That's not something that can be taken away so easily. An old man laughed aloud in the crowd. He stared at the 5th prince with shining eyes as he slowly approached him. At the same time, over half of the divine kings on the 12th floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace began to move slowly. They gathered from all directions, forming a circle that surrounded the 5th prince. All of their eyes were filled with greed and excitement. Although the 5th prince was surrounded by a streak of light from the statue's forehead, the light clearly did not possess particularly great defenses. Against so many divine kings, including many supreme divine kings who stood on the divine king's throne, he was unable to stop them at all. Meanwhile, the fifth prince sat on the ground with his eyes closed as if he had no idea that he was in danger. Mr. Shu panicked as he watched the divine kings slowly approach him. He immediately sent a communication message to Aladona in the distance. "Fellow, our Sky Empire has an extremely precious life star core. We hope you can help us buy some time for our fifth prince with a life star core as payment. At the same time, I can guarantee you that if the fifth prince successfully inherits the legacy, our Sky Empire will reward you greatly." Mr. Shu could only place his hopes on Aladona now. He did not mention that the life star core was with the fifth prince. Instead, he said it was in the Sky Empire because he was afraid that Aladona would try to steal it from him. Life star core. A gleam of light immediately flashed through Aladona's eyes when she heard about the life star core. She knew just how precious the life star core was. It was something that could only be chanced upon. In particular, it was a treasure to someone like her, who practiced the laws of life. "Sister Mu, hide in the divine hall first. They've taken out a life star core for me to assist them. I need to take action for the sake of the life star core. If you continue to remain outside, I'll be distracted," said Jianqin. "Otherwise, you'll be distracted," Aladona said to Shangguan Mu'er. With a wave of her hand, a jade-green divine hall appeared out of nowhere. "Sister, you have to be careful!" Shangguan Mu'er could only put the zither of the demonic cry away and enter Aladona's divine hall. Several dozen kilometers away, Jianqin failed to sense Shangguan Mu'er's presence because he did not use the senses of his soul and his line of sight. At this moment, he stared at the fifth prince, who was enveloped by light, and thought, "The Grand Prime's legacy is a hot potato. It won't be easy for the fifth prince to obtain it. However, regardless of whether he has the fortune or not, it's impossible for him to inherit the Grand Prime's legacy successfully." At this moment, someone had already moved against the fifth prince. They wanted to interrupt the fifth prince's attempt to inherit the Grand Prime's legacy. Immediately, the barrier of light around the fifth prince trembled. Although it possessed a certain level of defense, it was not powerful. It was unable to stop so many divine king present. The process of inheriting a Grand Prime's legacy was a difficult test. It was not like when Ziyun inherited the chaotic Prime's legacy, where she had a place of protection. As a result, strength, intelligence, and luck were all necessary to inherit the Grand Prime's legacy. Aladona took action at this moment as well. She shone with resplendent green light as she radiated with a dense presence of life. She arrived before the fifth prince with an overwhelming presence and said nonchalantly, "I have no intentions of becoming your enemy, but I need to take action. I need to stop everyone for a while so that this person will not be disturbed during the process of inheriting the legacy." As soon as they saw Aladona take action, many divine king on the 12th floor became fearful. Even the supreme divine kings were the same. However, this fear only lasted for a split second. Immediately, someone ignored Aladona's obstruction and directly attacked the fifth prince. When these people attacked, they were like a fuse, leading the people in the surroundings to attack. They circled around Adriana and targeted the fifth prince. Aladona's expression did not change. A ring of green light expanded in all directions with her at the center. Tendrils conjured from all the divine king that were affected by the green light. They grew rapidly, trapping them within. In just a short moment, several dozen divine kings had been trapped by Aladona. There were even supreme divine kings among them. On the other side, several powerful strands of sword chi and over a dozen laws suddenly arrived, directly attacking the fifth prince. Aladona extended a finger, and a green barrier silently condensed, blocking the attacks from the divine kings. However, even though Aladona was extremely powerful and there were not a lot of people who could threaten her here, she was still alone. She was unable to fend off so many attacks from all directions. Moreover, as several supreme divine kings attacked her together, she gradually began to feel pressured. That's the former greatest divine king of the god clan, Aladona. Several dozen kilometers away, Jianqin also recognized Aladona from the familiar presence. He was immediately stunned. This king needs all the divine crystals and heavenly resources from the Grand Prime's legacy. If you agree, this king will assist you. At this moment, an icy cold voice rang out. Shui Yunlan strode through the air in silver-white armor, making her way over from another statue at a steady pace. We agree. Please help as soon as possible, fellow. Mr. Shu beamed and agreed for the fifth prince in a hurry. This was because he had no choice but to agree at a time like this. Otherwise, let alone obtaining the Grand Prime's legacy, even the fifth prince would die. Moreover, their Sky Empire was an eternal empire. Their heritage ran deep, so they did not lack divine crystals or heavenly resources at all. As long as the fifth prince could obtain the cultivation methods and comprehensions of the Grand Prime's cultivation method and cultivation, they would not hesitate no matter how great the price they had to pay. Shui Yunlan sighed gently. She was filled with mixed feelings. Her feelings were extremely mixed. She had never thought that with her lofty status as one of the 4 great guards of the Ice Goddess Hall, she would actually be reduced to taking on a disaster for someone else for the sake of some cultivation resources. Chapter 2187. Her Majesty needs an extremely tremendous amount of cultivation resources to recover to her peak condition. In order for Her Majesty to recover, I can't give up on any opportunity to obtain cultivation resources. The cultivation resources on the Divine King are far too few, so I can ignore them. However, the items left behind by a Grand Prime of the Taoist sect of Neptunia in the past will definitely be extremely plentiful. I have to fight for it, thought Shui Yunlan. She took a step through the air and slowly made her way over from another statue. Although she did not give off an earth-shaking presence, many of the Divine King in the surroundings felt a mountainous pressure as she approached. At that moment, over half of the Divine King discovered in shock that their heartbeats actually matched the rhythm of Shui Yunlan's footsteps. It was as if Shui Yunlan's every step was stomping on their hearts, making them feel pressured and extremely uncomfortable. It was also as if their hearts were being guided by Shui Yunlan uncontrollably, following her footsteps and beginning to beat rhythmically. She's actually taking action as well. Who is she? Why do I feel like she's even more terrifying than a primordial realm expert? Seeing how Shui Yunlan was about to take action, the fear in the surroundings increased. At that moment, many of the Divine King with more ordinary strength stopped and slowly retreated. However, there were still many Divine King who believed they were powerful enough to charge towards the fifth prince in an attempt to replace him and inherit the Grand Prime's legacy. Although Shui Yunlan had yet to take action, the pressure she gave off on the Divine King was even greater than Aladona. Protect her, Shui. She's actually here as well. In the distance, Jianqin was extremely stunned. He was extremely surprised. He had received far too many pleasant surprises today. Not only had he discovered Mingdong here, but even Aladona and Shui Yunlan, who he was familiar with in the lower world, were here as well. However, soon afterwards, Jianqin was ravished with joy. He thought, since Shui Yunlan is here, it'll be much easier for me to find second sister. It won't be long before I meet you again. I just wonder how you've been after coming to the Saints' world with Shui Yunlan. Jianqin was secretly worried. His heart was filled with concern for his second sister, who had truly cared for him since he was young. At this moment, Shui Yunlan took action. She slowly extended her hand, and immediately an extremely terrifying coldness condensed rapidly, condensing into an ice flower in her hand. It was translucent and extremely beautiful. Shui Yunlan clenched her hand gently, and the ice flower condensed in her hand shattered. It turned into a terrifying coldness that expanded into the surroundings. Immediately, the temperature in the surroundings plummeted. In just a short moment, it became frigid. The ground was covered in a thick layer of silver, and countless plants were frozen in a single moment. The entire world had become a land of ice and snow, where everything was frozen. In the world of ice, all the early divine king cultivators felt their limbs stiffen. The terrifying coldness had broken through the defenses of their origin energy and invaded their bodies, freezing their origin energy and freezing their blood. In just a few seconds, all the early divine king cultivators had been frozen into ice statues apart from the people on the fifth prince's side. They were immobilized. In just a few seconds, over half of the mid-divine king cultivators followed in their footsteps. They had all been frozen into lifelike, human-shaped ice statues. With just a flick of her finger, she had made several hundred divine king cultivators lose their ability to battle effortlessly. Shui Yunlan's strength shocked all the divine king present. "Stop her!" A supreme divine king bellowed out furiously. His presence surged as powerful energy erupted like a tsunami. He worked together with a few other divine king cultivators and lunged towards Shui Yunlan at the same time. Shui Yunlan's eyes were extremely cold, devoid of any emotion. With a wave of her arm, a hazy, white profound ice chi formed a stream that enveloped the divine king cultivators. The divine king cultivators wore armor, and a layer of light from laws shone around them, forming two layers of defenses that protected them. However, such powerful defenses were useless before Shui Yunlan's profound ice chi. They were unable to stop her at all. In a single moment, the divine king cultivators were completely frozen, reduced to statues. With that, all the divine king cultivators on the 12th floor were stunned. Shui Yunlan's profound ice chi was just too terrifying. If she purposefully attacked someone, even a supreme divine king would be as insignificant as an ant. They would be frozen in a single moment. Nearby, Aladona became stern as well. She discovered that Shui Yunlan's strength had increased by far too much compared to the past. Although Aladona's strength had increased drastically over the past 3 million years, Aladona understood that there was still an extremely great difference between her and Shui Yunlan. Shui Yunlan should be half a step away from the primordial realm. She can truly break through at any time. Perhaps it's because she wants to enter the Poseidon Palace that she hasn't broken through yet. However, before she reached half a step away from the primordial realm, her battle prowess was already extremely impressive. She was no weaker than regular infinite primes. Now that she's half a step away from the primordial realm, who knows how powerful she has become? The Divine King here clearly isn't enough for her to use her true strength, Aladona thought with a heavy heart. As soon as Shui Yunlan took action, the situation took a complete turn. Over 1,000 divine kings, including all the early divine kings and most of the mid-divine kings, had been frozen. Just like that, over 2/3 of the people had been eliminated. Although the remaining people possessed impressive strength, they were unable to approach the fifth prince, with Shui Yunlan and Aladona blocking them. After witnessing Shui Yunlan's strength, Mr. Shu and the guards the fifth prince had brought were both shocked and overjoyed. With the assistance of two extraordinary experts like Shui Yunlan and Aladona, it would be no problem for their fifth prince to inherit the Grand Prime's legacy. However, the people of the Yun family were all shocked. Shui Yunlan's strength was just too terrifying. They had never thought that a divine king would possess such extraordinary battle prowess. Several dozen kilometers away, Jianshin's expression was very ugly. Although he had no idea why Aladona and Shui Yunlan would assist the fifth prince, if this continued, the fifth prince would probably inherit the Grand Prime's legacy successfully. Killing him would probably become even more difficult. After a moment of thought, Jianshin left as quickly as he could. He made his way to the 11th, 10th, and 9th floors, spreading the news of what had happened on the 12th floor as quickly as possible. What? The Grand Prime's legacy on the 12th floor has chosen an owner again. Gentian's news spread across the entire Poseidon Palace like a storm. Even all the supreme divine kings gathered on the 8th floor of the Poseidon Palace received the news. Someone has obtained a second Grand Prime's legacy? Is the news reliable? That's a Grand Prime's legacy. It's no less valuable than the Poseidon Palace. Whether it's true or not, we have to go and take a look. With our speed, it won't take long to get to the 12th floor. Let's go and have a look. Over 70% of the supreme god kings on the 8th floor left one after another. Although they had come mainly for the Neptunian Divine Palace and not for the Grand Prime's legacy, they had all come for the Neptunian Divine Palace. However, that did not mean that they were not interested in the Grand Prime's legacy. It was just that they understood just how difficult it was to gain the recognition of a Grand Prime's legacy, so they naturally did not harbor any illusions. However, if a Grand Prime's legacy was within reach, they would never let it go. In the blink of an eye, most of the supreme divine kings gathered on the 8th floor had left. Only a few remained. Even Songyin, Baiyi, and Gongzheng left with Jiana's group, heading to the 12th floor. When the three of them left, Mingdong opened his eyes. He glanced at the three of them coldly, but he did not stop them. In reality, after learning that Jianchen was still alive, Mingdong had given up on hunting down the three of them. He did not even look for the last divine king who had attacked Jianchen. This was because he wanted to wait for his brother to personally avenge him. Chapter 2188. Jianchen did not personally go to the 8th floor. After spreading the news, he observed from the 9th floor, paying attention to the entrance from very far away. Just as I had expected, the supreme god kings on the 8th floor are also interested in Grand Prime's legacies, Jianchen said with a sigh. Jianchen could not help but sneer as he watched the supreme god kings constantly charge up from the 8th floor and depart with lightning speed. The main reason why he had spread the news was to draw the attention of the supreme divine kings gathered on the 8th floor. This was because these divine kings had all come for Xiaoman. They wanted to obtain the entire cerulean Poseidon Palace, so they were naturally extremely powerful. The rankings engraved on the divine king's throne were all rather close to the top. Many of them had already made it into the top 100 or even the top 10. Their battle prowess was extremely impressive. Although there were divine kings on the 12th floor of the cerulean Poseidon Palace, they were basically ranked towards the bottom. They were one of the weaker ones among the divine kings. As a result, they could not withstand a single blow from Shui, Yunlan, and Aladona. However, the divine kings who had rushed up from the 8th floor were naturally worlds apart from the people on the 12th floor. After the divine kings had traveled far away, Jianchen appeared in a flash. He maintained his burly figure and appearance. He concealed his presence and followed them, making his way to the 12th floor again. When Jianchen returned to the 12th floor, a powerful storm of energy swept over. A terrifying pressure permeated the surroundings, making him feel like the sky was about to collapse. A portion of the divine kings who had come up from the 8th floor had already taken part in the battle, so the battle there had already reached an abnormally intense level. It was devastating and caused the world to howl. It was like the end of the world. The divine kings who had come up from the 8th floor were indeed extraordinarily powerful. Every single one of them possessed the right to reign supreme over the divine kings. When they worked together, they actually became embroiled in an intense battle with Aladona and Shui Yunlan. Aladona shone with resplendent green light as she gave off a surging presence of life. Dense laws of life revolved around her, making her indestructible. Many divine kings were unable to harm her at all. This was because she controlled the laws of life. Her presence of life was just far too dense. Unless she encountered an opponent with similar strength to her, it would be difficult to even injure her. Aladona blocked over 30 divine kings all by herself. However, Aladona was also kind and benevolent. Against the divine kings, she only blocked and kept them busy. She did not attack viciously or harm any of them. On the other side, compared to Aladona's benevolence, Shui Yunlan was cold-blooded and merciless. Coldness permeated her surroundings, freezing the entire world. The entire world had turned into glaciers. Her gaze was extremely cold, like a god of slaughter. She showed no mercy at all, injuring many divine kings already. If it were not for the fact that they had fled quickly, if it were not for the fact that there were others keeping her busy, there would probably have been a divine king who would have died to Shui Yunlan's hands already. This woman appeared on the 8th floor before. She stood on the lava without relying on any external assistance. I never thought she would be so powerful. Who is she? She can block so many divine kings all by herself, and she seems to be doing it with ease. Clearly, she hasn't used her full strength. There are quite a few of the monstrous geniuses who rank in the top 100 among the people who surround her. The coldness she can control is just too terrifying. I've never seen such terrifying coldness before. Even the supreme experts who rank in the top 100 of the divine kings' throne don't dare to face her head-on, aside from a few people who rank in the top 10 of the divine king's throne. They're all very mysterious. I know far too little about her, so I can't guess her identity. Is this woman the strongest Aoyama under the divine king's throne? Impossible. It's rumored that the strongest Aoyama under the divine king's throne is a member of the martial soul lineage. She uses martial soul force. Although I've never seen what martial soul force looks like, it clearly can't be the power of coldness. In the distance, many of the divine kings who had come up from the 8th floor did not take part. They watched from afar as they sighed in amazement. They were all stunned by Shui Yunlan's strength. Fear or sternness appeared in their eyes. "Fifth Prince, you have to succeed. You have to succeed." In the distance, Mr. Shu stared at the 5th Prince, who was enveloped by the light. He was extremely nervous. Now he had already distanced himself from the battle with a group of guards and the people of the Yun family. He used the cataclysmic onyx fan to protect everyone. This was because there was nothing he could do in a battle like that. You won't succeed. You definitely won't succeed. That's right. There are so many supreme divine kings here. They won't just watch you take the legacy. Yun Xian also cursed inside. She had once sworn that she would avenge Genshin in the future, so she naturally did not wish for the 5th prince to succeed. As a matter of fact, she was even eager for the 5th prince to die here. Suddenly, the might of a god artifact appeared. A divine king wielded a huge hammer and smashed it toward Shui Yunlan with the pulses of a god artifact. Shui Yunlan's gaze did not change at all. She did not become flustered at all. A thin layer of ice crystals covered her soft, white hand. It was translucent as she directly struck out with her hand. The palm strike was extremely powerful. It possessed a bearing of supremacy over the 8 wastelands. Boom! With a great boom, the god artifact in the divine king's hand was knocked away by Shui Yunlan's palm strike. Even the divine king vomited blood as he was blown away. Moreover, as he flew backwards, a thin layer of ice crystals rapidly spread on his body. In an instant, his entire body turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. When he fell to the ground, his entire body was like a piece of ceramic, shattering into pieces. This was truly shattering to pieces. Heavens, she actually took on a god artifact with her bare hands. This woman's strength is truly terrifying. She doesn't even fear god artifacts. The hearts of all the divine kings in the surroundings skipped a beat when they saw this. If it were not for the fact that Shui Yunlan was a divine king, they would have even suspected that they had encountered a primordial realm expert. At this moment, the streak of light around the 5th prince suddenly brightened. It shone like the sun, illuminating the entire world. A space ring rapidly flew out from the streak of light. When the space ring landed on the 5th prince's finger, he seemed to have formally gained some sort of recognition. Under the guidance of the streak of light, He slowly flew towards the forehead of the statue. "The ring has come out. Do it." It was also at this moment that a gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the divine kings who had not taken part in the battle. They all chose to take action at the same time. All of them turned into blurs as they charged towards the fifth prince with surging power. They attacked the streak of light around the fifth prince with scorching light. A Grand Prime's legacy was just too tempting to them. Even with Shui Yunlan and Aladona blocking them, they did not shrink back at all. Immediately, as all the divine kings took action, the shock waves of the battle reached a whole new level once again. They were extremely violent, as there were just far too many divine kings, several hundred of them. There were even several dozen divine kings in the top 100. Aladona and Shui Yunlan were unable to stop them all, so they directly arrived before the barrier of light and caused it to tremble violently. Chapter 2189. Although the beam of light that shot out from the forehead of the grand beginning vulture possessed a certain amount of defensive power, it was not very powerful in the end. Under the attacks of so many peerless divine king, it was unable to last for long. However, at this moment, under the guidance of the light beam, the fifth prince was being pulled toward the center of the statue's brows. Although his speed was not fast, it was not slow either. It was enough for him to successfully enter the center of the statue's brows before the light beam that enveloped him shattered. The grand stone statue is indestructible. We can't let him enter Grand Prime's statue. Everyone, use your full strength and stop him with your god artifacts. A divine king bellowed. Immediately, the pressure of a divine king permeated the air. Many divine kings no longer cared about the depletion of their origin energy and used their divine artifacts. There were just far too many supreme, divine king taking action. Even with Aladona and Shui Yunlan's unparalleled battle prowess, they were unable to keep an eye on all of them. Immediately, waves of powerful attacks were launched from various god artifacts, causing the light around the fifth prince to tremble violently and show signs of shattering. At this moment, the fifth prince had already arrived before the statue's glabella under the guidance of the light beam. He was about to enter the statue successfully. His eyes abruptly opened at this moment, and there was unconcealable joy and excitement in his eyes. He swept his gaze across the surroundings, and when he saw the divine king, who was originally unreachable in his eyes, charging at him with a pair of red eyes, greedily wanting to seize the fortune that belonged to him, his heart was filled with joy, and he could not help but laugh out loud. "Ha ha ha ha! This prince is blessed by the heavens, which is why I have such a fortuitous encounter. This is my fortune, my path to the heavens. Everyone, it's best if you don't fight over it. You can't go against the will of the heavens. You can't go against it." The fifth prince laughed heartily at the sky. He knew that accepting the legacy of a Grand Prime was already a foregone conclusion. No matter how many supreme divine kings there were in the surroundings, they would not be able to stop him. This was because the light screen that enveloped him could still last for 3 breaths of time. As for him, he only needed to take a single step to enter the statue. The fifth prince turned around beautifully as he laughed. He looked at the glabella of the statue that was inches away. In his eyes there was a vortex there. It possessed powerful pulses of space. He knew that as long as he stepped into the vortex, he would be teleported into the statue or an unknown space created by a Grand Prime. No one would be able to disturb him. The fifth prince had a pleased expression on his face as he lifted his foot and prepared to step in. However, at this moment, the originally gloomy world of the 12th level that was only enveloped by hazy moonlight suddenly became abnormally bright, as if it was daytime. 2 strands of sword chi that were only the size of a finger shone with resplendent light, like the sun. They radiated with terrifying sword chi that even the supreme divine kings would be shocked. They shot towards the fifth prince in a straight line. At this crucial moment, Jianchen, who had always been hiding, took action. He would never just watch the fifth prince enter the statue. So he shot out 2 strands of profound sword chi without any hesitation at the last moment. At the same time, the third strand of profound sword chi was ready. He could use it at any time. The profound sword chi moved with unbelievable speed. It broke through the obstruction of space and time, arriving before the fifth prince in a single instance. Before the fifth prince could even react, the first strand of profound sword chi had already struck the streak of light. Immediately, the screen of light trembled even more violently. It had already endured the attacks of many divine kings, so it was already on the verge of collapse. Now that it was struck by the profound sword chi, the streak of light immediately became covered in fine cracks. They spread out like a spiderweb. Afterwards, the second strand of profound sword chi struck the streak of light as well, immediately shattering it. However, the second strand of profound sword chi did not disperse because of this. Although it had expended a lot of energy, a third of it still remained, causing the second strand of profound sword chi to dim. However, it did not slow down at all. With a third of its remaining energy, it turned into a streak of light and stabbed into the fifth prince's forehead with lightning speed. Arg! The fifth prince immediately cried out in pain. His facial muscles twitched. His soul had been injured. Moreover, since the streak of light around him had been shattered by the profound sword chi, he could no longer maintain his position in the air. He fell out of the sky in a horrible shape. This was because no one could maintain their position in the air around the Grand Prime statue. Without the protection and guidance of the streak of light, the fifth prince was naturally unable to maintain his height. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. From when Jianshin struck out with the two strands of profound sword chi to when the profound sword chi shattered the streak of light and injured the fifth prince's soul, only a single moment had passed. This was because the profound sword chi was just too fast. It was so fast that basically all the Supreme Divine King present were unable to react in time. What is that? That white light seems to be two strands of sword chi, but it doesn't seem like it either. It's too fast. I can't see it clearly at all. I can't even capture it with the senses of my soul. In the surroundings, all the Divine King felt terrified. All of them could sense life-threatening danger from the two strands of profound sword chi. If they had been purposefully targeted with such terrifying speed, would they be able to survive? On the other side, Shui Yunlan and Aladona turned their heads as well. They looked in the direction where the profound sword chi had come from. They were stern. No matter how Jianshin tried to hide himself, he would not be able to escape their senses when the two of them purposefully searched for him. As a result, Shui Yunlan and Aladona naturally discovered the culprit behind the profound sword chi. It was a bare-chested, burly man whose eyes were as sharp as swords. However, when they saw the burly man, Shui Yunlan and Aladona's expressions differed. Shui Yunlan remained indifferent, cold, and emotionless. Aladona's eyes narrowed. She stared right into the man's eyes and shivered inside. That gaze! The bare-chested man's piercing gaze gave Aladona a familiar feeling. However, Aladona became rather confused when she saw the man she was completely unfamiliar with. She had no idea why she would feel a sense of familiarity. Far away from the battlefield, Mr. Shu watched the light shatter and the fifth prince fall from the sky while clutching his head in pain. His eyes immediately became bloodshot as he stared in the direction where the profound sword chi had come from with hatred. He could no longer maintain his gentle and refined demeanor. His face twisted as he roared out in a heart-wrenching manner, "Jianshin, it's you! It's actually you. I never thought that not only were you still alive, but you've even ruined the fifth prince's opportunity to rise up in a single step. From now on, we'll never be able to coexist with you." Although Mr. Shu did not actually recognize Jianshin, his memories of Jianshin's profound sword chi were still fresh in his mind. With just two strands of profound sword chi, he immediately recognized Jianshin's identity. Fellow cultivators, please kill Jianshin. From today onwards, you'll be the most esteemed guests of our Sky Empire. Our Sky Empire will definitely treat you as esteemed guests, Mr. Shu pleaded with Aladona and Shui Yunlan. At this moment, his hatred for Genshin had reached its limit. The fifth prince was about to obtain a heaven-defying fortuitous encounter and rise up in a single step. The entire Sky Empire would rise up with him. Yet in the end, Genshin launched a sneak attack and ruined everything. Chapter 2190. That's right. It really is Genshin. The person who secretly interfered must be Genshin without a doubt. To another side, by Yi, whose soul had been injured by the profound sword Qi and had yet to recover, called out. He stared in the direction where the profound sword Qi had come from as disbelief filled his face. Wasn't he struck into the lava by us? How can he still be alive? Impossible. This is definitely impossible. Genshin was already heavily injured back then. After falling into the lava with such heavy injuries, his body should have melted away. How can he still be alive? The successor of the solitary sword lineage, Gongzhang, cried out as if he had seen a ghost. It can't be wrong. It definitely can't be wrong. The person who secretly interfered was Genshin because no one else can use such terrifying sword Qi apart from Genshin. Song Ying cried out as well. He was greatly shocked, and he struggled to remain calm. The three of them had clashed with Genshin in the past. They had personally witnessed Genshin being struck into the lava. Originally, they thought that Genshin would have been reduced to nothing, and he should have been incinerated by the lava. However, now that Genshin had suddenly appeared, the shock they felt was indescribable. Arg, Genshin, I'll make you die a horrible death. To another side, the fifth prince who had fallen out of the sky after being injured by the profound sword Qi roared out furiously. His eyes had already become bloodshot. His resentment towards Genshin was so great that he had almost lost his mind. He was only a step away. He was only a step away. He would have been able to enter the Grand Prime statue and receive the most complete legacy, truly inheriting the legacy of a Grand Prime. No matter how many divine kings there were outside, they would only be able to watch from outside. They would not be able to disturb him at all. However, Genshin's interruption had made his final step away from the Grand Prime's legacy seem as distant as the horizon. He had completely lost all hope. This filled the fifth prince with so much resentment that he had almost lost his mind. He had been struck from heaven to hell in an instant. He struggled to accept this huge difference. What he struggled to accept even more was that the person who had struck him from heaven to hell was actually Genshin. Aladona and Shui Yunlan stopped as well. They both looked in Genshin's direction as the light in their eyes flickered. No wonder I found that gaze rather familiar. So it's Genshin. I never thought he would have already emerged from the bottom of the lava. Aladona smiled faintly. She had never thought that the war god's extremely difficult mission would be completed so easily. Genshin, to be sure, to be twos to be him? He's hidden, so I can't identify him. However, since so many people have confirmed it, it can't be wrong. It looks like there's hope for me to find Emotianyan. A smear of joy appeared on Shui Yunlan's face that was hidden under the mask. She then looked at the fifth prince. More accurately, she was looking at the space ring on the fifth prince's finger. The space ring had flown out from the forehead of the Grand Prime statue, so its value was unimaginable. I've already assisted you. According to our agreement, all the divine crystals and heavenly resources in the Grand Prime's legacy belong to me. Shui Yunlan's cold voice rang through the entire 12th floor. She ignored Mr. Shu's repeated calls for her to kill Genshin. Before the fifth prince could even agree, she directly conjured a hand of ice and reached towards the fifth prince. When Shui Yunlan took action, the supreme divine kings in the surroundings did not stand by idly either. They all charged towards the fifth prince to steal the space ring on his finger. Moreover, the eyes of some of them lit up. They ignored the space ring on the fifth prince's finger and instead stared at the fifth prince's head greedily. They had their eyes set on the fifth prince's soul. Of course, not everyone charged towards the fifth prince. Among the divine kings, half of them rapidly approached Jianqin without any hesitation after learning about Jianqin's identity. Aladona did not take part in the fight. She looked at the crazed Mr. Shu and said, "I've already bought some time for your fifth prince," but he failed to obtain the complete legacy in the end. "It's all your fifth prince's fault for not being fortunate enough. I will go to your Sky Empire to take the Life Star Core." Before she had even finished speaking, Aladona charged towards Jianqin quickly. She could already tell that Jianqin was in an extremely bad situation after his identity had been exposed. In the distance, Jianqin had already turned into a blur, flying towards the exit of the 12th floor as quickly as he could. He had already expected the profound sword qi to expose his identity. But in order to stop the fifth prince from successfully inheriting the Grand Prime's legacy, it did not matter even if his identity was exposed. Moreover, he had already made preparations to retreat. "Quick, stop Jianqin. He wants to escape to the 11th floor. Since he's still alive, the girl must still be on him. We have to capture him this time," a divine king called out from behind. In their eyes, Jianqin was crucial to whether they could obtain the Poseidon Palace. As a result, they could not let him go no matter what. However, there were a few people who hesitated. Although they also pursued Jianqin, they were clearly not as powerful as the others. First young master, Jianqin is Mingdong's sworn brother, and Mingdong is connected to the heavenly palace of Bixing. What should we do? Our target is only the girl. We don't want to become enemies with Jianqin. This is an open and fair competition. At this moment, the divine kings gathered on the 12th floor had already split into two groups. One group charged towards the fifth prince in an attempt to steal his space ring, while the other pursued Jianqin. On the other side, the fifth prince looked at the hand of ice that shot towards him as well as the many divine kings that rushed over from the surroundings. He could not help but laugh madly. "You're dreaming if you want to steal my fortune." With that, the fifth prince suddenly took out a simple talisman from the space ring he had obtained from the Grand Prime statue. He activated it as quickly as he could. Immediately, a mysterious power erupted from the talisman. It enveloped the fifth prince and vanished before Shui Yunlan's hand of ice could reach him. The Azure Poseidon Palace is a high-quality god artifact. It's impossible for him to break through the restrictions of a high-quality god artifact and flee outside with just a talisman. He must still be in the Azure Poseidon Palace. Everyone searched for him. The divine kings in the surroundings dispersed. A portion of them went to search for the fifth prince, while the others joined the group that pursued Jianqin. Shui Yunlan's eyes turned cold. She glanced in the direction that the fifth prince had vanished in coldly before arriving before Mr. Shu and the others. She snorted coldly. "Before I find your fifth prince, all of you must follow me. If you want to live, make your fifth prince abide by his promise and hand over all the divine crystals and heavenly resources in his space ring to me." "Fellow, we will definitely abide by our promise. Please kill Jianqin. Once you succeed, our Sky Empire will reward you handsomely," Mr. Shu pleaded. "Humph, you want me to personally kill Jianqin? I'm afraid you won't be able to pay that price." Shui Yunlan snorted coldly. "Our Sky Empire is an eternal empire after all. Our heritage runs deep, so what price can't we afford? Please help us, fellow.